great things are happening and everybody stinks. John McCain says he'll support the tax bill. Here was the reaction from the editor of the New York Times. Meanwhile, some people are sickened to learn that NBC's Matt Lauer had a button installed on his office desk that could lock the door so women staffers couldn't escape his grotesque sexual attacks. It kind of reminds me of the time I had a chair installed that automatically strapped women in so a gigantic fan could blow their clothes off. Of course, I was 12 years old and it was just a fantasy, and Lauer was actually locking women in his office and getting rapey on them while being paid $20 million a year. But other than that, it was kind of similar. NBC scored this major interview with the perpetrator.
From NBC News, this is Today with Matt Lauer.
You were fired by the network over allegations of sexual harassment. Did you ever send a lewd text or email to another employee? 5 women. Did you ever have any human resources cases brought against you? And that happened back in 2015, and I just want to mention the two things can be mutually exclusive. Think about those 5 women and what they did. They came forward and filed complaints against the biggest star at the network they worked at. Think of how nerve-wracking that must have been. Doesn't that tell you how strongly they felt about the way they were treated by you?
Kind of speechless there. Geraldo Rivera, meanwhile, says that all these sex scandals may be criminalizing courtship in the workplace. Pretty soon, an ordinary guy won't be able to lock a girl in a room and bring her chocolates, or even lock her in a room and give her flowers. And next thing you know, you won't be able to lock her in a room and assault her until she faints and has to be taken to a nurse. How will any girl ever be able to meet the man of her dreams? We have Ken Stern here today, a liberal who once ran NPR, but he decided to leave his bubble and go out into America to meet some of us right-wingers, so of course we killed and ate him. But he went on to write a book called Republican Like Me, How I Left the Liberal Bubble and Learned to Love the Right. We will talk to him about it right here, and then we'll kill him and eat him. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shape, tipsy-topsy, roll on to zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
All right, we started this week with a day in which everyone behaved badly, and we're ending the week with a day in which everyone behaved badly, but things are going great. Everything is terrific. So I'm going to end off, we were talking about morality and rules-based morality versus individual morality. I'm going to present, by the end of the show, I'm going to present a different vision of those two things, a way of looking at rule-based and individualistic reality that's really different than the way most people think of them. And we'll get to that, but first we have to go through all the crappy things that people are doing and all the great things that are resulting from it. I mean, this is the weirdest time imaginable. And then it will be the semi-Klavanless weekend, because remember, you still have Another Kingdom. The new episode drops on Friday, and after I leave here, I'm going to pitch it to one of the biggest TV producers in town. So please, you guys were so great when I asked you before to go on and subscribe and give it good reviews. I mean, it's been up. It's now close to 1,200 5-star reviews. I mean, it really is amazing. And people, genuinely, I don't think they're just leaving these things, unless it's Knowles going on different computers. I don't think they're just leaving the reviews. They seem to really love the story. And I think, personally, I know I shouldn't say it because I wrote it. Personally, I just think the story gets better and better as it goes along. So please go on iTunes or whatever you use on your Android and subscribe to it. It's called Andrew Klavan's Another Kingdom, and subscribe and leave the good word. Also, it's December. This is the last day of November, and Advent will be starting soon, and that means you need a new watch, right? Also, you want to give people watches. You want to put them in their stockings, and that means you want a movement watch like this one. A movement watch like this. This one actually is spelled MVMT, movement, because for some reason these new companies, they can't use vowels. I'm going to start a company called EIU. Just use all the old vowels that have been thrown out of all the other companies. But movement watches are really beautiful. A couple of guys started this because they loved beautiful watches, but they didn't want to spend the big money. So they used, the internet to bring down the price. And now you can get it really is lovely watches like this. People complimented all all the time, and you can get it for watches start at only $95. That would cost you hundreds probably if you went in to a jewelry store and tried to buy them there. And this is great stuff. At those prices, you can put this in a stocking, you can put it under the tree, and people will really like this for men and women, and people will really like these very, very clean, modern designs. Movement watches. They have already sold over 1 million watches in over 160 companies. And if you are smart enough, and because you're here, that's always a question, but if you're smart enough, you can get 15% off today with free shipping and free returns by going to movement.com. That's MVMT.com/Andrew. That'll get you 15% off. Watch has a beautiful, clean design. It will step up your watch game. Go to movement.com/Andrew for 15% off today. Join the movement. All right. So John McCain, this is big news. I mean, John McCain is supporting this tax plan. And he was one of the big holdouts. They were writing articles saying he might be the vote to kill it, just like he killed the health care repeal. But this would really be – we know this is good because the New York Times, a former newspaper, is going insane. I mean, if you read the paper, it is hilarious. I mean, we showed that guy's head exploding, but that doesn't even describe here's their op-ed from the editorial. It's called – "The Senate is rushing to pass its tax bill because it stinks." Don't pull any punches. They have absolutely no nuance, nothing. And the reason is, I think, that this tax bill basically reverses the socialist premise that has been put in place, not just during Obama. It really was all the years before, that your money belongs to them. Remember in that old video game, all your outposts belong to us, all your money belong to them. And this does reverse that. And guys, I will tell you, a lot of people who are listening, I know, did not live through the Carter to Reagan transition, and I did. And during the Carter years, you had to wait online for gas, and I'm talking about hour-long lines to get gas. Everybody was depressed. There was all kinds of – you walk down the street, and people had these long faces. The neighborhood I lived in, I remember men and women getting in fights in the street, people screaming in the night. It wasn't a great neighborhood, but you couldn't be in a great neighborhood because there were no jobs. Everybody was unemployed. Inflation was terrible. And then Reagan came in, and it was the same thing. The New York Times and all the papers and everybody was telling us what a dope this guy was, what a dope. Cut taxes, major tax cut. The economy skyrocketed. I may have this wrong, but I think it was like something like 8% GDP. We're now at 3.3% GDP growth. It was the people it helped, single women and black people. That was the biggest. Those were the biggest benefactors. But the whole country turned around. I mean, and people talk about Reagan's charm and his ease and all his humor, but none of that would have mattered if the country hadn't turned around the way it did. It was like laughing gas. So we'll get to this in a minute, because the thing is, it really is the way you hear the news now, people are just behaving badly. And even Donald Trump, who was doing some amazing things, he did something yesterday that I got to knock him for. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but he retweeted these, how can I put them, unconfirmed videos of Muslims attacking people. Now, look, you have heard me go after Islam, and I think that the mass immigration that Angela Merkel engineered and that Obama was happy to engineer, where they were bringing refugees in without thinking about how they were going to fit into our communities and whether we could help them instead of building safe places for them in their own countries, insane. But this guy, he is the president of the United States. He has got to know when he retweets something, he's got to know what it is, where it comes from. It comes from a far-right organization in England. Now, here's the difficulty of this situation, right? These European countries are race-based countries that have been changed by us. They have taken on our ideas. Our idea is we're a creedal country. We have a creed. If you ascribe to that creed, you can be an American. We don't care. You're Irish, you're Italian, you're black, you're white. Fine. But you got to ascribe to the creed, okay? So they don't have that. England is England because it was founded by Angles. France is France because it was founded by Franks, Germans, all this stuff. They have a point. When these people come out and they say, we want, a white Germany or we want a white France, they have a point. It's not a great point. But when you have reasonable people saying, gee, I think my culture is being destroyed by violent, women-hating Islamics, I think my culture is being destroyed. And next to that reasonable person a Nazi is standing, you basically give credibility to that Nazi because he's standing next to a reasonable guy. And that's why you don't open your gates and flood the place with a bunch of people that you can't assimilate and who don't like your ideas and who don't like your culture and are just running away and have this vision in their mind of transforming England or Germany into a Sharia country. You just don't do that because it gives credibility to the far right. And Trump, listen, I love the fact that Trump calls out Islamic extremism for what it is. I think when you don't call it out, when you don't say it, you just bottle up the hatred. You bottle up the hatred. So I think good things may come out of what Trump is doing, but I think he made a mistake. I don't think you give credibility to people until you know what you're retweeting. I truly think what he did was he pressed the button. People always argue. I was talking to Rob, our producer, yesterday, that people argue, is Trump playing three-dimensional chess or is he an idiot? I don't think he's either one. I think he's like a great running back. He's a guy who knows where the daylight is. You talk to a running back, he's not going to explain to you all the strategy of the game, but when you give him the ball, he knows where to run. He knows where to go. He has that instinct. Trump has that instinct. Sometimes the running back runs into a wall and gets flattened on the scrimmage line. I think this time he made a mistake. You don't want him to discredit himself because we need him to say this thing. Could good come out of it? Yes, I'll tell you what good could come out of it. The shattering of political correctness is a good. It is an diluted good. Shattering political correctness is a good. We need to talk about Islam because we're a creedal country. And so that, the left's argument is, look, we have a creed so we can let in everybody. But you can't let in people who have a creed that is against your creed, right? You can't let in too many people who say, yeah, your creed, I'd like to destroy it. I'm going to use your freedoms to destroy your freedoms. I'm going to use your religious tolerance to destroy religious tolerance. I'm going to use the fact that you can go anywhere and do anything without having your papers checked. I'm going to use that to blow up your churches and blow up your planes and all that stuff. You can't let those people in. Trump is absolutely right about that, and that's why I want him to have credibility when he speaks. And I think when he does something like this, where we just don't know what those videos are. I mean, one of them was a guy attacking I think it was in Holland, I think it was in the Netherlands, attacking a guy on crutches, and the woman who tweeted it said, oh, here's a migrant, Islamic migrant attacking somebody. And they said, well, no, he's not. He was actually born in Holland. My question is, yeah, but, was he a Muslim guy? I mean, that's her point. That is her point. And I do not want to stir. That's the other thing. We have to deal with this situation because Islam is a genuine threat to the West. But we have to deal with it without having religious hatred blow up in our faces. Anyway, he did go out and he made a speech. Where did he make the speech? Was it St. Louis? I can't remember where he made the speech yesterday. He's promoting, I think it was in Missouri, he was promoting the tax bill. And when he is on his game, he is absolutely hilarious. Here he is promoting the tax bill, saying it's going to be bad for the rich because this is the only Democrat talking point. It's just going to help the rich. That was the other New York Times headline. As a bill increasingly helps the rich. So here's Trump saying it won't help the rich. This is cut number 2.
We're also going to eliminate tax breaks and complex loopholes taken advantage of by the wealthy. Who are they? I don't know. I think my accountants are going crazy right now. It's all right. Hey, look, I'm president. I don't care. I don't care anymore. I don't care. Some of my wealthy friends care. Me, I don't care. This is a higher calling. Do we agree? As Hillary said, what difference does it make? It made a big difference. Made a big difference.
This is, I mean, he's hilarious when he's like this. This is when he is absolutely great. The U.S. economy, this is from the Wall Street Journal this morning, the U.S. economy is running at its full potential for the first time in a decade, a new milestone for an expansion now in its 9th year. Total economic output in the third quarter was slightly above the maximum sustainable level of output as estimated by the Congressional Budget Office. So things are going really well with all the things that are happening and all the panic and CNN is boycotting the Christmas party. I love this. CNN is boycotting the White House Christmas party. So all the people who are there won't get to enjoy Don Lemon walking into a corner and having to have assistance finding his way out. They'll just have to settle for celebrating the birth of Christ. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough without CNN there. Anyway, if Trump succeeds with this, and it does what I hope it will do to the economy, so many good things could come out of it. Nobody knows the future. We're all connecting the dots. It's like connecting the dots to make constellations. There are a million gazillion stars in the sky. You collect them, you see a Big Dipper. If you connect them in a different way, you see something else. That's the way the future is. If you decide to connect the dots to a good future, a booming economy will mean a Republican replacement, will mean another Trump term, and then a Republican after that. So we could have President Mike Pence. We could even have President Ted Cruz, depending on how things go, which would be amazing. I hate to have to say the destruction of political correctness, even though, maybe it took a guy like Trump, maybe it took a bull to walk into that particular China shop and shatter that particular China. But once it is gone, an elegant, restrained guy like Pence could really do a lot with political correctness gone. I think it'll be good for the arts. I think it'll be good for everything. So all these people are behaving badly, and all this great stuff is happening. And you could even have a sort of Pollyannish good view of this sex scandal. Some of these guys in these sex scandals. I will get back to this. Roy Moore. He made a speech in a church at this Magnolia Springs Baptist Church, okay? And he gets up and he says, who's to blame for all these women accusing him of going after them when he was 30 and they were 16? Listen to this.
And they tried unsuccessfully. To change that. They've done everything. When I say they, who are they? They're liberals. They don't want conservative values. They're the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender who want to change our culture.
What? What do the gays have to do with it? There's like some gay guy walking down the street in West Hollywood. It's like, what does he have to do with the fact that Roy Moore was chasing 16-year-old girls around the room? It's like, yeah, I wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been for the gays. It was the gays who made me chase those girls around the room. Yeah, they were screaming, but it was the gays. It was the gays. Come on. This guy is such a fraud. He's such a phony. And look, I don't know who I would vote for in Alabama. I got to be honest with you. I think the people. Who was it? It was David Limbaugh, Rush's brother, really bright guy. He sent out a tweet today saying, I genuinely wrestle with these questions, and if that makes me a reprobate, so be it. I wish the choices were better, but there's nothing I can do about that. Not voting would not absolve me if I'm judging myself, because one will win. These are complicated questions. Each person has to go into his heart. There's no rule. All the people on earth can pound their hand into their palm, their fists into their palm, and say, you got to do this, or you got to do that, or this is the threat. These are very, very difficult questions. I have no respect for the guy. I have no respect for him. But the other guy believes in killing babies 5 minutes before they come out of the womb. To me, that guy belongs behind bars. So I don't know. I don't know how you make that decision. I'm glad I'm not in Alabama. I'm not going to tell him what to think. I think each person has to go into his heart. What you don't do is you don't lie. You don't lie about the situation. You don't tell yourself that this guy is some kind of Christian hero, because he's not. You don't blame gay people for what he's been doing. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. Lying is the one thing you cannot do. You have to tell yourself the truth, or how can you make a good decision? Speaking of lying and speaking of people behaving badly, NBC says they had no idea that Matt Lauer had a button under his... Now, there is some explanation, because what's his name? Roger Ailes had this too, a button under his desk, which I'm sure he used in much the same way. But apparently, if you're very famous or very powerful, that's a security measure. You can, if somebody comes in with a gun, you can lock the door. I guess that's what it's for. But what our friend Matt was using it for was he was locking the door and then just assaulting these women. It's insane. So the NBC says our management had no idea. They had no idea. And here's the guy, Variety wrote one of the only reason they fired this guy, they keep saying, well, a woman came forward with a claim that we really believed. We couldn't get out. They fired him because the Times and Variety were coming after him, and they knew it. They were coming down the pike. It was going into the press. They had to get ahead of that story. So here's the reporter from Variety on with Alison Camerata. His name is Ramin Setudeh, on whether NBC knew.
We spoke to 3 women who consider themselves victims of sexual harassment. And we learned in one of the cases, Matt Lauer gave this colleague a sex toy with a note about what he wanted to do with the sex toy. There was another story about how Matt Lauer had a colleague come into his office and took down his pants and exposed himself to the woman.
And told her, expected a sex act when he did that.
And reprimanded her when she resisted. And the question, I think, in going forward is, what did NBC know? Who was involved? Speaking to the victims, they say that the network was aware of Matt's behavior.
Meaning what? Who did the women that you've spoken to, who did they tell? Who did they go to?
High-level executives at NBC were told about his behavior.
Meaning Andy Lack.
I'm not going to name names, but high-level executives were told about his behavior, both current and prior executives.
And what was their response to the women?
And we were told that they protected Matt Lauer because he was so valuable to the Today Show.
Yeah. They're lying. NBC is lying. I try not to predict the future too much. I predict that NBC will be exposed as lying. They are lying, and you can't. Somebody installed the damn button in the desk. Somebody knew these women were going in there. Everybody knew. Everybody knew, I'm sure. I don't know how you would work in an office like that and not know that was going on. Hey, we're going to stay on so you can hear my interview with Ken Stern, author of the book Republican Like Me. A liberal guy goes out and met conservatives, and somehow we let him live. But he came back to tell the story. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't subscribe. You should subscribe. You should subscribe for a lousy $10 a month, and then you can be in the mailbag, and then your problems can be solved. And if you subscribe for $100, you can be in for the entire year, and you get the Leftist Tears tumbler, which will continue to fill up as this show goes on. But let's just pause for a minute. Pause for a minute. If you're a guy, go look in the mirror. I know, right? It's ridiculous. It's absurd. And you're bringing down the show. This is a classy place, and you can't come in here looking like that. So what you got to do is you got to go to Indochino and get yourself a bespoke suit. That's what the British call it, a bespoke suit. Bespoke suit is as opposed to going in and pointing at something and saying, "Yeah, take up the cuffs." You go and have it fitted to yourself. And there's a little office here in L.A. and there are offices around the country where you can go in and get measured. And if you can't do that, or you're someplace where they don't have one, you can just do the measurements yourself and send them in online, and then they'll have them on file. And anytime you want a shirt or a suit, pair of pants, they will make them for you perfectly to fit you perfectly. And you can choose, you can design them, you can design the shirt, the collars, the pockets, everything that you want. So you visit a showroom or shop online at Indochino.com, pick your fabric, choose your customization, submit your measurements, and place your order, and it will arrive in just a few weeks. I have a beautiful shirt they made, and it fits like a glove. This week, my listeners can get any premium Indochino suit for just $359 at Indochino.com if you enter Klavan at checkout, Klavan. That's 50% off the regular price of a made-to-measure premium suit, plus the shipping is free. So go to Indochino.com, promo code Klavan for any premium suit for just $359 and free shipping. It's a great deal, and you do not have to look the way you look right now. You're embarrassing everybody, especially here. So here's what I was thinking. I was thinking about the fact that it stuck in my mind all week, that Cokie Roberts line that every woman in the press corps knew she couldn't get into an elevator with John Conyers. And I don't mean to elevate myself above anybody, because every man knows that the thoughts going through his head are disgusting. We all have every guy has a pornographic movie running through his head. Every guy has thought terrible things. Some of us have said terrible things, done terrible things. Okay. This is true. I decided in the 80s, when feminism first flared up, the disease, the plague of feminism first flared up, I decided I wasn't going to buy into it. I just wasn't going to live that way. I didn't like it. I thought it was foolish. I thought, I'm an individualist. I think any woman can do whatever she wants. It's not for me to judge what choices she wants to make in life, but I am going to make the choices that I want to make in life. When a woman gets into an elevator with me, I take my hat off. Okay? Now, that usually only comes out in New York, because in California I'm not always wearing a hat, but in New York I always wear a hat. And when I get in an elevator, if a guy gets in, I don't care. But if a woman gets in, I take my hat off. And I was thinking about this because we've been talking about the fact that these two kinds of ways of approaching morality. One is a rule-based system that at its extreme becomes tyrannical, and the other is an individualist system that at its extreme becomes anarchical. It just becomes chaos. But I was thinking, like, I don't like people telling me what to do, and I don't actually trust anybody to tell me what to do. Not the church, not any organization, certainly not the government. I don't trust anybody to tell me what to do. I believe I have a conscience and a mind and a moral center, and I can find my own way studying great thinkers and studying the church and going to church. And I thought, why do I take my hat off when a woman gets in the elevator? Certainly not because I think some woman is just dying to see the top of my head, although I know they are, really. But but no, it's not. It is a rule I made myself that trains the mind. I think that is what rules are for. They train the mind. You pick the rule, you live by the rule, and the rule trains the mind. And anybody who any man who is married knows that he is married to a different kind of creature than himself. I mean, any guy who sits and talks to his wife and loves his wife is sitting. There are days, so help me. I mean, I've been married now almost 40 years. There are days, so help me, when I look at my wife and I think, I do not understand what this woman is talking about. I know she's a brilliant girl. I know she's got a great heart. She's the best wife in the world. I do not understand a word coming out of her mouth. That is something that marriage trains you to respect and love. You know, I mean, if you're paying attention, you start to realize there's another way of looking at the world. And even though it sounds crazy to you, it actually makes a certain amount of sense if, you are of the other sex. So you have these rules that you set and that you follow. You can get them from your church. You can get them from the great thinkers like Aristotle, the great ethicists who have talked about them. You can get them wherever you get them. You get those rules, and you follow those rules by a discipline, and they train your mind. Art trains your mind. This is one of the reasons I love the arts so much, is they train your emotions. The arts are a school for your emotions. And the reason people follow certain rules in the arts is because they know that those are the ways you can school people's emotions. Even bad people write great works and paint great paintings. The rules are a way of training your mind. And so you can find the rules that will do that. You know where you're lacking. I mean, look, there are going to be bad people in this world. There are going to be people who press the button on their desk and lock the door so they can attack young female staffers. Those people, are not going to follow the rules, but you have to follow the rules because they will train your mind. And as your mind becomes trained and as your emotions become trained, you will become a more happy person. You will become a joyous person. The rules are not there because every rule works for every person. The rules are not universal. The rules are what you turn to train your mind to become the person that God meant you to be. Every one of us knows that we were meant to be something better than we are right this minute. Every one of us knows that. There's no person who doesn't know it. There is even Adolf Hitler knew, down in his heart until he wasn't there anymore, until his soul was gone, which I assume happened at some point in his life. But everybody whose soul is still there has a little message that's coming in saying, you were meant to be something bigger than this. The rules are a way of training. I believe that's the way I read the gospel. When Jesus says something, I don't think like, I have to do this or I'll feel guilty. I think, do that. Judge not, lest you be judged, and you will train your mind to see the world in another way. Look at yourself before you look at the guy across from you, and you will learn to see the world in an eternal, beautiful, brilliant, godly way, and your life will become more joyful. That is what I have to say on another day when everyone stinks, but things are going great. So we're going to enjoy it. Here is Ken Stern. We recorded this a little earlier. He was an NPR CEO, and for, I think, like 10 years, and he one day decided he was in a bubble and he was going to leave and go see the country and talk to the conservatives. He wrote a book about it called Republican Like Me, How I Left the Liberal Bubble and Learned to Love the Right. And here is the interview we just recorded earlier. Ken Stern, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So you were the CEO of NPR, which to my audience is like the heart of liberal darkness. So you were really coming out from a place of sheer left-wingery, but you found that you started to feel that you were in a bubble. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, so in addition to NPR, I live in a 94% Democratic ward in Washington, D.C., 100% Democratic household. So, I live in what clearly is a liberal bubble.
And so what motivated you to actually try and get out?
So I think there are a couple things. One is just a deep concern about the growing partisanship in this country, the polarization, the fact that we're increasingly living in a place where the right and the left don't know each other. And when you don't know each other, it becomes really easy to demonize the other side. So I can't do much about that on a sort of global basis, but I want to do something for myself and get out. And Atticus Finch said in To Kill a Mockingbird, if you want to understand someone, you have to see things from their point of view, and I wanted to do that.
Okay, so what was the procedure? What did you start to do?
Yeah, so I mean, it's actually not such an obvious thing what you do when you want to see things from the other side. So there's, in fact, a lot of different things I did over the course of almost 2 years.
Okay.
I traveled the country. I spent a lot of time in evangelical churches. Here I am, a nice agnostic Jew from Washington, D.C., spending time with evangelical churches. I went pig hunting in Texas. I went to NASCAR races. But, I also did lots of things. Like I just went to Pikeville, Kentucky, and spent a couple days there. I spent a lot of time in Youngstown, Ohio. I just spent a lot of time with people who I ordinarily wouldn't spend time with, trying to understand their perspective and their point of view. I did a lot of listening in this trip.
And was it a shocking experience?
Yeah, so yes and no. I mean, let me actually sort of step back. The Washington Post did a couple of years ago what they call a word cloud. They went to Democrats and said, give us one word to describe Republicans. And they did the same thing with Republicans. And it all came back nasty. I mean, Democrats said sort of the worst things about Republicans. They're bigots and they're greedy, and Republicans had equally bad things to say about Democrats. And so I had to sort of say to myself, I don't believe that, there are 80 million really bad people on this side. But, somewhere deep inside, I knew those words were there too. So I went out and, both surprisingly and unsurprisingly, I found lots of people who I admired. Lots of people trying to do the right things for their families and communities. Sometimes I didn't agree with them, but I always found them to be sort of thoughtful and interesting. And when you get out, you find that Americans actually almost ruthlessly moderate when you get talking to them face to face. They tend to sort of move towards the middle, maybe not in polls, but in real life. And that was one of the great things that I found. It was always easy to find common ground when you were face to face with people.
It really is interesting to me. One of the things that happened to me as a kid is I did the same thing as I was a kid. I wanted to be Jack Kerouac, so I wandered all over the country. And one of the things that always shocked me was that people have much more complex moral worldviews than the people who are supposed to be their superiors in the media, that the people in the media are always lecturing them, but they actually have a much more complex and interesting moral worldview. So you're an agnostic Jew, you're sitting in an evangelical church. Were you listening to things that shocked you?
Shocked is not the right word. I think it was interesting when I sat down with Pastor Steve. So let me tell you. So I ended up spending a lot of time in an Assembly of God Church in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I was actually counseled to go, having been to a mega church, go find a small Assembly of God church. I said to myself, where the hell am I going to find an Assembly of God church? And I ended up Googling it and finding there were 100 different congregations within, a stone's throw of me. So I picked one randomly and ended up with Pastor Steve at the Freedom Church in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And we actually had tons in common. We were similar age, similar family structures, a wife and a 10-year-old kid, similar backgrounds, different views on faith, but really lots of things we agreed on. And I met other people who had sort of the same experiences. On any 10 things, we probably agreed on 8 of them. So why are we fighting about the 2 when we could find 8 to find common ground on?
I actually do believe this. I believe that about 70% of the country agrees on 70% of the issues, and we constantly are talking about because it makes better TV. Did your mind change about anything? Did you change your positions?
Absolutely. So you have to start. I mean, what my mindset was had to start with the notion like, how could I be right on everything? I'm as self-infatuated as anyone else, but I had to say, look, I can't possibly be right on. But I picked a bunch of issues which I thought I was going to be right on, but I knew I wasn't anywhere close to being expert on. Gun control, climate change, poverty programs, things where I had sort of well-honed life instincts, but I knew my knowledge was deep, sort of surface deep, and I went out and found experts. I spent a lot of time with John Lott, the conservative economist, learning about gun issues. I spent time with a lot of research. I spent time hunting and going to gun shows and talking to lots of people who knew a lot more than me. And you know what? Not surprisingly, I actually came away with a much more nuanced view of issues.
Yeah.
I wasn't converted necessarily to being a gun rights guy, but I have a very different view of the issue. Just to tell you a bit of a story. So I went hunting in a place called Gonzales, Texas, went pig hunting and had a great experience there. And it's about 8 miles as the crow flies, but 30 miles by road from Sutherland Springs, where they had the last church shooting. And having had all these experiences when that happened, I sort of viewed it very differently. I mean, I sort of saw all the liberals running out immediately saying, gun control, gun control, gun control. But I knew the issue was much more complex because of the time I spent on the issue.
So the book is called Republican Like Me, How I Left the Liberal Bubble and Learned to Love the Right. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. Is that fair to say? I mean, you wouldn't actually do anything shocking like vote for a Republican, would you?
I might. So it's, yes, heresy. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I mean, avowedly Democrat, spent time in Democratic politics. But for the year that I did the book, or year and a half, I actually went and changed my party registration. I became a Republican and tried this, really sort of live that life. And when I was done, knowing a lot about sort of my research and motivated reasoning, I was open to the possibility I would stay Republican. In the end, I didn't. But I didn't become a Democrat either. I'm now a registered independent because I see the value of both sides. And also I've become very skeptical about both parties and their ability to represent the country as a whole. So I would vote for the right Republican, and I would vote for the right Democrat, depending upon who they are.
Now, I started out as a liberal and became a conservative over time. And one of the things that happened to me was I found that my liberal friends were genuinely intolerant. They were genuinely intolerant of other opinions. They could not listen to me. One thing I found almost repeatedly was that they could not listen to my changing opinions for more than 30 seconds without cursing. Suddenly I found that their language became incredibly obscene. So I would be talking to someone I thought was the nicest person, and suddenly this foul language would become. Did you have that experience at all? Did you find that as you became sympathetic to the right, that your left-wing friends became less sympathetic to you?
So my 10-year-old son has been known to boo my television appearances now. I went on Tucker Carlson at the beginning of as soon as my book came out, and he actually, I'm told by my wife, he booed my appearances. And I think there's actually a sort of a moral story there. He's not like he thinks he's right about everything, even if he doesn't know anything. And I think that's a truth of the matter for a lot of us. The bad experience I've had coming back is social media. And sort of if I learn to love the right, which to me doesn't mean necessarily agree with everything, but it means to sort of feel the bonds of affection that Lincoln talked about. I must also be a white nationalist or a gay hater or Benedict. All have been called by people who haven't read the book. And, there is that strain of intolerance that you're describing that I've experienced personally. I think it's a lot of places in society, not just on the left, but I certainly have seen a bit of it and has left me with somewhat of a jaundiced view of some of my former friends of the left. But the people who read I will say that I don't want to get carried away by social media. It's still a thin slice of America, thankfully. When I talk to people about it, whether they're conservative or liberal, often have good conversations about it. So there's hope for us yet.
Now, you were the CEO of NPR, and one of the things I truly think that drives people crazy, and I attribute a lot of the division in the country to this. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with certain Supreme Court, like Roe v. Wade, that didn't give us a chance to argue it out. Even if we had come to some kind of compromise, at least we would have fought with each other and talked to each other and confronted each other. When the Supreme Court makes a diktat like that, I think it's very difficult for us to resolve our hearts, even though the law gets resolved. But one of the things that I have to say, that as a right-winger, I just feel a lot of animosity toward the media. And I think that they are it's not just unfair. They are actually hostile and dishonest. And it means that instead of talking to my liberal friends, because I still do have liberal friends who I love and who actually are people of goodwill, instead of that, I'm listening to the New York Times, guys like Charles Blow at the New York Times, who I don't think should be allowed to write anything anywhere. I think he should be allowed, but I don't think he should be published in a major newspaper because he's a hysterical child. So do you look back on your time at NPR and do you think maybe we could have handled that better? Maybe we could have hired a couple of conservatives somewhere along the way?
Yeah, it's funny. I've lost my life membership to the public radio conference now because my book's not about media. Other books are about media. Yep. But wherever I went, people wanted to talk to me about it. So naturally. So, I got a year's full of feelings about people feeling left out by the media, looked down upon by the media. And it gave me a lot of time to think about it. And I don't, things have changed in the media over the decade since I left NPR. I mean, I think the media is different than it was 10 years ago. But, what I came back and said in a couple different pieces was, as I look back on my time at NPR, it wasn't that I thought NPR was overtly partisan. In fact, I think they're almost, they have sort of here's a view from the right, here's a view from the left, almost metronome-like, which I personally don't even love that. But there's an effect of groupthink. I mean, everyone in mainstream media is pulled from the same pool. And no matter how hard you try, it's going to have an effect. And what I've said is, look, you would cover race only with white men, no matter how well-meaning and dedicated to the craft. We can't cover politics with people who are mostly liberals. It's the same thing, no matter how dedicated to the craft they are. That has not been entirely well received by some of my former colleagues.
It is an amazing thing because it seems such a simple. I mean, I wrote a piece for the LA Times maybe 15 years ago where I said, if you want to stop your subscriptions from dropping, try hiring some conservatives. Just hire a few to represent other points of view. I mean, if there is somebody in the mainstream media who voted for Donald Trump, I would like to meet him because I simply don't think that exists. So let's talk about Trump for.
But before you get to that, I do want to say, I think your point there is exactly right. There are great people in the media, people who I really admire, but the trust level for the media is now around 35%. Some of that is caused just by the nature of the lack of trust in institutions generally, but it's also partly the media's fault, and I think they need to do be much more introspective about it than they are.
So let's talk about Trump, because Trump has divided people on the right, he's divided people on the left.
Sure.
I have I've had a fairly steady reaction to him, which is that I've been thrilled. I've been thrilled by some of the stuff he's done. I'm not so thrilled by the way he behaves, but I do understand it. I do believe that he is fighting a media that he is fighting on the media on the media's terms. Is this, at Thanksgiving dinner, we all had these political arguments, of course, and mine was my liberal relative saying to me, this man is destroying the country. Is Trump destroying the country?
So, look, I'm not a fan. So let's just start off. No matter how much I learned to love the right, I have not learned to love Donald Trump. I've learned to love a lot of people who voted for him and try to see him through their eyes, which is hard. I think on the setup is, I think the media and Donald Trump have gotten into this cage match, which is actually to each of theirs advantage. The media gets to fight him, and it drives their numbers up, and Trump gets to beat on them, and it's virtue signaling to his base. I think it's destructive from both sides. I mean, it's destructive institutions that need to be that are important pillars of society. And I don't love the way he's divisive by nature. It's worked really well for him in politics. I don't think it's the right thing for the president of the United States to do.
Okay. I'm running out of time, so I want to ask you, going forward, if you could write a prescription and say this is the way out of it, because it bothers me too. I mean, I am a partisan, but I want to be able to talk and compromise. I do not want to be constantly at each other's throats. I don't think it's good for the country. If you could write a prescription to solve this problem of division, what would it be?
Yeah, so I don't have a good thing. First, I start by if I could wave my magic wand, I'd get rid of social media. I would support the Supreme Court on gerrymandering, because what we have is uncompetitive races around the country, and that allows the extremes to control Congress from both sides. But mostly I would say let's get out of our bubbles, stop listening only to ourselves, listen to the other side. We actually have a lot to learn from each other. And if we do that, we'll all be better off, even if we don't agree.
I do agree with you, and I think that time is coming. I actually think, weirdly enough, that Trump, for all his divisiveness, is going to lead to another time, because I simply do not think that we can continue at this level of hatred for one another. Since you started by quoting Lincoln, I mean, he did say we are not enemies but friends shortly before we all started killing each other. I hope we can avoid that this time. Anyway, Ken Stern, Republican like me, how I left the liberal bubble and learned to love the right. Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoyed it.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. It's nice to know that a liberal can come and talk to us and not open fire. Stuff I like. I have discovered a couple of TV shows recently that I love, and I'm going to just talk about one of them. I'll talk about another one next week. But if you're not watching Search Party on TBS, you have got to watch this show. It's so well plotted and so well acted and so well written. Here, I'll give you the story. I'll set up the story, and I'll show you just a little bit of it. It's basically about these 4 millennial, empty, vain, narcissistic, meaningless people living meaningless lives on the edge of the New York art scene. And one of them, Dory, her name is, she's played by Alia Shawkat. And none of these people have a big history. None of them have big credits. But one of them is just a little bit smarter and more sensitive than everybody else. And she kind of starts to realize her life is meaningless. But she doesn't know what to do about it, and she has no way to address it. And so she becomes obsessed with the disappearance of a girl she met like once in college. And it just starts to obsess her, and she starts to search for this girl. It's called Search Party. She starts to search for this missing girl as a way of bringing meaning into her life. And what's so great about the show is it's genuinely funny and a terrific picture of narcissism and millennials and all this stuff. And it's got this actor who plays the gay guy, John Early, who is a gay comedian, who is so good that they just every now and again they'll just cut away to the look on his face, and it cracks me up. But the thing that makes it so good is that it's kind of cute. It's not, laugh out loud. You won't always be laughing out loud. But then at the end of every show, the mystery just ratchets up a little bit. And so it's really well plotted. Here's just a little bit of the trailer for the first season. It's in its second season now.
Do you guys remember that girl, Chantal Witherbottom?
Oh, she sucked.
Well, she's gone missing.
What do you mean gone missing?
She's like a missing person.
Well, where is she?
That's the question. She's out there, and I'm gonna find her.
What?
But I need your guys' help.
Okay, I love this idea.
Chantal!
What does Chantal have to do with you?
I'm just tired of things that don't matter.
Yes. Let's put the pieces together. Let's figure it out.
This stuff scares me.
This is just the beginning. I want to break into places and learn sleight of hand and stuff.
Andrew, what are you doing with a taser? Tase the guy. Don't gesture with the taser.
You have wiggly wrists.
I'm being followed. Who are you?
Why do you have such a vested interest in this?
I just want to find her.
It's really, I have to say, I don't binge watch. I binge watch this. I watched the entire first season in 2 days. And it's only a half hour. Each episode's only a half hour, so you can just eat it like candy. Jess tells me that John Early was in, what was it, Arrested Development? Oh, she was in Arrested Development. Oh, Alia Shawkat was in Arrested Development. Okay, I did not know that. And the blonde who plays this, she's kind of slutty, but you just feel for her because she's so lost, and she has an accomplished sister, and she's a failing actress. Her name is Meredith Hagner. She was a soap opera actress. Anyway, great stuff. All right. It is not yet the Klavanless weekend. If you go on and download Another Kingdom on iTunes, I am leaving from here to go pitch it to TV. I'll let you know how that goes. I don't have my hopes up. I have absolutely zero hopes because I just think I'm so politically toxic. I would be shocked if I sold anything to anybody at this point. But it'll be interesting. We will end, now Advent begins. We're going to be talking a lot about Advent as we go forward. This is the run-up to Christmas. And the record bestseller list is a record by the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist. They have put out their Christmas album, and it is beautiful. They sing beautifully, and I think we've been dealing with so many horrible people today and this week that it would be nice to deal with the Dominican Sisters of Mary and go out with their version of the Carol of the Bells. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is the Andrew Klavan Show. Please download Another Kingdom, and I will see you all on Monday if you survive the Klavanless weekend. The Andrew Klavan Show is produced by Robert Sterling, executive producer Jeremy Boring, senior producer Jonathan Hay. Our supervising producer is Mathis Glover. Technical producer Austin Stevens. Edited by Alex Zingaro. Audio is mixed by Mike Cormina. Hair and makeup is by Jesua Olvera. And our animations are by Cynthia Angulo and Jacob Jackson. The Andrew Klavan Show is a Daily Wire Forward Publishing production. Copyright Forward Publishing 2017.
All right. Well, the media think Trump is on his way out. But is he? Trump takes to Twitter to fight back. The Republicans finally pass a tax bill. Plus, the President of the United States sounds off on Roy Moore. And we'll go through all of the biblical allusions to taxes. Yes, really. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. So much coming up. And I'm going to give you an intellectually honest look at whether President Trump is really in trouble over this whole Mike Flynn indictment thing, what the Mike Flynn indictment thing actually means. I don't think it means nearly as much as the media are making it out to mean. I think the media are way out in front of what the news is actually showing. And in fact, it seems to me that the Flynn indictment in some ways actually shows that the Mueller investigation is not going to end with anything except for a political prosecution of the President of the United States by Democrats. I want to get to all of that. I also want to get to a huge Supreme Court case that is going to be discussed tomorrow. I want to talk about the tax bill. We'll talk about all those things. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at My Patriot Supply. So you look around and you see that there are natural disasters on a regular basis, right? There are earthquakes in California. Apparently, there's been a swarm of small earthquakes in California that are supposed to be leading up to the big one, perhaps. We can all hope not. But regardless of whether it happens or not, you should be prepared for any disaster that may arise, whether it is man-made or whether it is natural. This is what the government suggests. This is what prudent people do. This is why you should go over to My Patriot Supply and you should get their 102-serving emergency food kit for just $99. The experts in food storage say it can last in your home up to 25 years. 102 servings of emergency food for $99. You basically spend $100, and now you're safe and your family is safe from the vagaries of natural disasters for the foreseeable future. It seems like a great way to make sure that you're protected. You stick it in your closet, you forget about it. Folks in the office have tried it. They say that it tastes exactly like home cooking. Order several kits at this low $99 price. Make sure that your family is safe. Call 888-803-1413, 888-803-1413, or go online to preparewithben.com. That's preparewithben.com. The kits include breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. They are ship free. Call My Patriot Supply right now, America's most trusted food storage company, 888-803-1413, 888-803-1413, or preparewithben.com. Again, that seems like a cheap price to ensure that your family is safe. So preparewithben.com. Okay, so we start, of course, with the big news that broke on Friday that Mike Flynn had pled guilty to lying to the FBI. The indictment showed that that was really all that was there. And I had speculated two possibilities. Possibility number one is that he pled to lesser charges in order so the FBI could get him to flip on Trump. Possibility number two is that this is basically all the FBI had. And now the FBI is just going to charge a bunch of people for lying to the FBI in the absence of any crime. Remember, what Mike Flynn, the former national security advisor, was charged with was lying to the FBI about him making phone calls to the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, on December 22nd. What exactly did he say in those phone calls that was so all-fired terrible? Apparently, he called up and he said, President Obama, on his way out, is attempting to create these new sanctions. He wants to demonstrate that Hillary Clinton lost because we cheated in the election. Don't worry about it. The sanctions are never really going to be taking effect. They're not going to damage you. Just hold your fire. And Putin said, okay. Okay, so that's really nothing special, okay? It's a transition team. He was about to enter office as the national security advisor 3 weeks later. The people who are saying, well, it's a Logan Act violation. The Logan Act prevents you from basically making your own foreign policy, but it's not clear that the Logan Act is even constitutional. It was passed into law in 1799. It has never convicted anyone in 218 years. It has not convicted a person, not one. So the idea that suddenly it's going to be applied for the Trump administration is absurd. You've seen many Democrats who have applied their own foreign policy while Republicans were in office, while other Democrats were in office, for that matter. And Jimmy Carter basically ran North Korean foreign policy while Bill Clinton was in office. Teddy Kennedy tried to go over to the USSR and then make a deal with the USSR so that they would help affect the 1984 election cycle so that he could get in. Right? But Barack Obama was conducting calls with other members of foreign governments long before he took office in 2009. All this stuff has been happening routinely. So the idea that Mike Flynn did anything deeply wrong by contacting the Russian ambassador is absurd. Also, apparently, he asked the Russian ambassador to help stymie a UN resolution that Barack Obama was trying to push in his final days to slap Israel over so-called settlements. And so Kislyak was called by Flynn, presumably at the behest of Jared Kushner, and Kushner said, if you could back off that would be nice. Again, I don't see anything wrong with any of this. I really don't see anything terrible about this, but he did lie to the FBI. So now what it looks like is that Robert Mueller is putting together a bunch of charges based on lied to the FBI. Well, if this turns out to be a bunch of people who lied to the FBI about non-criminal activity, as I said last week, this sounds a lot like Scooter Libby. Scooter Libby, if you recall, was an aide to Vice President Dick Cheney during the W administration, and there was a story going around that someone in the White House had leaked the personal information of Valerie Plame, a CIA agent, in order to get revenge on her husband, Joe Wilson, because Joe Wilson had written a long op-ed in the Washington Post about how the Bush administration had been wrong about WMD in Iraq. It turned out that it was Richard Armitage over at the State Department who had leaked Valerie Plame's name, but Scooter Libby sort of either got a conversation wrong or lied about a conversation to the FBI. He was prosecuted, he was put in jail, and Bush commuted his sentence. This sounds a lot like that. Right? Scooter Libby didn't actually commit any crime other than lying to the FBI. Lying to the FBI is a crime, but if there's no underlying crime, it's not Watergate. Watergate was a bunch of lies about an actual crime, a break-in at the Watergate Hotel that was designed to put bugs in the Democratic National Headquarters. Okay, nothing like that has happened here. There's no evidence of any actual crime by anyone in the Trump administration with regard to collusion, with regard to working with the Russian government. No charges of serious crime. And all the rumors that Mike Flynn was going to be charged with corrupt ties to Turkey or to Russia, none of that materialized. Andy McCarthy over at National Review, he has a really fascinating piece in which he discusses at length the idea that there would be some sort of deal cut where Flynn only gets prosecuted with the smallest possible crimes and he's let go on the bigger ones in order to cut a deal with them. He says that's not the way it works with prosecutors. Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, he says what you do is you actually prosecute the biggest crimes and then you say in the plea agreement that he's going to get off on lesser years for bigger crimes unless he works with us. Because the problem is once you file charges, the charges are filed. Right? So if all they're filing charges on are the lesser charges, that's not much of a threat to Mike Flynn. So all this talk about how inevitably it must be that Mueller has something really terrible on Flynn, and now Flynn is going to say something really terrible about Trump, not a lot of evidence to suggest that in any case. So President Trump responds over the weekend. It's not really bright. You know, the president of the United States really should keep his mouth shut on this stuff, or he should send out his lawyers to say something. But the president always feels the need to sound off himself, and in doing so, he gets himself in a little bit of hot water. Here is President Trump defending Mike Flynn.
Well, I feel badly for General Flynn. I feel very badly. He's led a very strong life, and I feel very badly, John. I will say this. Hillary Clinton lied many times to the FBI. Nothing happened to her. Flynn lied, and they destroyed his life. I think it's a shame. Hillary Clinton, on the 4th of July weekend, went to the FBI, not under oath. It was the most incredible thing anyone's ever seen. She lied many times. Nothing happened to her. Flynn lied, and it's like they ruined his life. Very unfair.
The most incredible thing anyone has ever seen in history is what Hillary Clinton did. Hillary Clinton will always be the go-to for President Trump. But Trump is not wrong when he says that Hillary Clinton apparently lied to the FBI. I think that that's probably true. And she got away with it. Mike Flynn lied to the FBI, and now it looks like they're pillorying him. Is lying to the FBI okay? Of course not. He committed a crime. And if he committed a crime, then he should pay the price for that crime. But the idea that Michael Flynn was actually trying to cover up for something more nefarious is not true. Now, here's where Trump really gets himself in trouble, or at least we don't have the evidence of that yet. Here's where Trump really gets himself in trouble. So Trump tweets out this over the weekend. He tweets, quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. It is a shame because his action during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide." Okay, so he's basically saying what I'm saying here is that Flynn lied to the FBI, but there was no underlying crime. The problem here is that what the president is actually saying is that he fired Flynn knowing that Flynn lied to the FBI. So this led a lot of people to suggest that this was obstruction of justice. Right? The reason that it sounds like obstruction of justice is because James Comey, if you recall, had testified that President Trump told him to let Flynn go. And then he apparently fired Flynn because he had lied to the FBI. So the implication of this tweet is that Trump knew that Flynn had lied to the FBI when he fired him, not just lied to the vice president. So if he knew that Flynn lied to the FBI, and then he went to Comey and told Comey, then the head of the FBI, to let Flynn go, a lot of people on the left claiming that this is obstruction of justice. It isn't. I'll explain why legally. But here is the flashback of James Comey.
And the reason I keep saying his words is I took it as a direction. Right. I mean, this is the President of the United States with me alone saying, I hope this. I took it as this is what he wants me to do. Now, I didn't obey that, but that's the way I took it.
You may have taken it as a direction, but that's not what he said.
Correct. That's why
he said, I hope.
Those are exact words. Okay. Correct.
You don't know of anyone that's ever been charged for hoping something. Is that a fair statement?
I don't, as I sit here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. So a lot of people on the left saying, well, you know what that is? That right there, that's obstruction of justice. Well, Dianne Feinstein is saying this, right? Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, she says this looks like obstruction of justice.
As you know, I'm ranking on Judiciary, and the Judiciary Committee has an investigation going as well, and it involves obstruction of justice. And I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice. I think we see this in the indictments, the 4 indictments and pleas that have just taken place, and some of the comments that are being made. I see it in the hyper-frenetic attitude of the White House, the comments every day, the continual tweets. And I see it most importantly in what happened with the firing of Director Comey. And it is my belief that that is directly because he did not agree to lift the cloud of the Russia investigation.
Okay, the problem here is that there is no clear-cut obstruction of justice. Even if he fired Comey, let's say worst-case scenario, he fired Comey because he wanted Comey to stop investigating Flynn. There's no clear-cut investigation, obstruction of justice, because the president does have the power to fire the FBI director for any reason he sees fit. Okay, I've actually looked at the statutes, and I'm going to go through the statutes right now with you on obstruction of justice as to whether obstruction of justice actually took place. Not clear legally that obstruction of justice has taken place. By the way, the idea that Trump shut down the investigation is obviously untrue. I mean, the special counsel has gone forward. Trump has the power to fire the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller. He has not, in fact, done any of that. So before I get to whether this is obstruction of justice, even if the Democrats' worst suspicions are confirmed, first I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Saucy. So, you know, the news cycle moves so fast. Life is full of stress. At night, you want to unwind. You want to relax. You want some alcohol. Well, that's why you need Saucy. Saucy is the alcohol delivery app. They deliver your favorite wine, beer, liquor right to your door on demand. It is Lyft or Uber for alcohol. So if you're in LA, San Francisco, Chicago, San Diego, Sacramento, your Saucy order will arrive at your door in 30 minutes or less, ready to drink. This happened to me the other night. My wife and I were interested in drinking a little alcohol. Been a rough day, and we didn't have any alcohol in the house. So we immediately got on the Saucy app, and Saucy had somebody arrive at our door within, it was really, I think, about 20 minutes with the alcohol that we desired. It's a pretty awesome thing. For the rest of you, if you're not in one of these big cities, then you will have Saucy delivered to you in 2 days or less nationwide. So you can order in advance, and in 2 days or less nationwide, it will arrive anywhere. There are no order minimums, no delivery fees, no running to the store. If you've got the Saucy app, you got a fully stocked bar right there on your phone. You're in the middle of a party. You don't want to break from the party. And so now you just get on your phone, and some schlub shows up with your alcohol, and you don't have to worry about running out to the local Dale's Jr. to make sure that you're actually stocked up for the party. For a limited time, you get $15 off when you download the Saucy app and enter promo code BEN. That's the Saucy app, spelled S-A-U-C-E-Y, Saucy. Enter promo code BEN for $15 off. Get that Saucy app today and use promo code BEN. It makes your life a lot more convenient. And honestly, there's nothing that's better than you're sitting there watching your Netflix and chilling, but you don't have the chill. That's what Saucy provides to you. Saucy app, and use that promo code BEN. That's correct, folks. I did just use the phrase Netflix and chill. Okay, so as far as obstruction of justice, the Democrats are basically claiming now that Trump fired James Comey in order to obstruct justice. This doesn't wash for a couple of reasons. One, the special counsel has continued his investigation into Russian collusion and has found nothing. Collusion is not a crime. And now let's look at the actual statutes on obstruction of justice. So there are 3 separate federal laws that cover obstruction of justice. There's 18 U.S. Code 1503. This is called the Omnibus Clause. It covers, quote, corruptly or by any threatening letter or communication influencing or impeding or endeavoring to influence, obstruct, or impede the due administration of justice. But this clause requires a pending judicial proceeding. And there is no pending judicial proceeding because Flynn had not been indicted yet. Now, if Trump were to go to Mueller now and say to him, cut it out, let Flynn go, then that would actually be obstruction of justice. But he doesn't have to do that. He can just pardon Flynn. Right, which is not obstruction of justice because he's the president, and that's within his purview. There's 18 U.S.C. 1512C. This provision of law covers anyone who, quote, obstructs, influences, or impedes an official proceeding or attempts to do so. It is not clear that an FBI investigation is actually an official proceeding, and it's hard to prove intent in any case And by the way, it's not enough to show intent to violate the subsection. You have to take a substantial step toward the accomplishment of that goal. So again, there's no substantial step taken toward obstruction. And finally, there's 18 U.S. Code 1519, and this provision covers destroying evidence. There are no accusations that President Trump destroyed evidence in any of this. So is there obstruction of justice? No, she's wrong. Does Trump have the capacity to fire Comey for any reason? The answer is yes. Comey works for him, so there's no obstruction. He could fire Comey. Does that mean that it's smart for the President of the United States to go out there and start saying that he knew that Flynn lied to the FBI and then he fired the FBI director? No, that is not smart of the President of the United States. It gets him in all sorts of hot water, and that's why the President's lawyer came forward and said, I wrote that tweet. It wasn't Trump. The idea being that it doesn't establish Trump's knowledge that Flynn lied to the FBI if the lawyer wrote the tweet. Now, what's interesting is that when you watch the conflation of two separate narratives from the Democrats, Dianne Feinstein, I believe, is a lawyer, so she knows enough to know that you can't make charges of collusion without evidence, or you shouldn't, and that the Mike Flynn charges don't show that there was actual cheating in the election between Russia and the Trump campaign. Joy Behar, however, is a moron, and so she doesn't know that. So Joy Behar over at The View, she completely misconstrues the report from Mike Flynn, and you'll hear the crowd cheer as they think they finally got Trump.
Oh, breaking news. ABC News' Brian Ross is reporting Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team and is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yes!
And the crowd goes wild for news that never happened, because it never happened. So we reported on Friday that Brian Ross had said this on ABC. Only one problem. Brian Ross was wrong. So let's get to Trump fighting back against all of this. So Trump is not a guy who sits down when he feels that there's a need to stand. The president is a counterpuncher, as the vice president says, and the idea that the president of the United States is going to take a backseat to anyone on this stuff is not true. So the president immediately goes out front and starts fighting this. So he starts by slamming the FBI itself. So he goes on Twitter and he says, report, anti-Trump FBI agent led Clinton email probe. Now it all starts to make sense. He's saying this is a witch hunt, that the FBI, that the Clinton probe was led by a bunch of biased people, and that the people who are now going after him from the FBI are biased as well. Now, it is certainly the case that James Comey was biased in favor of Hillary Clinton. There is no doubt whatsoever that she actually violated the law, and he let her off the hook preemptively. And it's not a surprise that an anti-Trump FBI agent was helping Hillary Clinton out. The idea that the FBI is a non-political body is not true. The FBI has always been somewhat of a political body. That does not mean that local FBI agents aren't doing their jobs, but Trump isn't wrong about this. By the way, it is important to question, and I asked this question on Fox. It still has not been answered. This FBI agent, the story here is that there was an FBI agent who had texted some nasty things about Trump, and Robert Mueller fired him. The question is how Robert Mueller found out about it. So if Robert Mueller found out about it and fired him, then Robert Mueller is not biased, right? That would be evidence that Robert Mueller is trying to do the right thing. If he found out about it because the media reported on it and then he fired him, then it might be that the Mueller investigation is inherently biased. I don't think Mueller is necessarily biased against Trump. I think that this is what special prosecutors do. They dig and they dig and they dig and they dig until they find a crime. And if they can't find a crime, then they get a bunch of people in there to talk to the FBI, and then they use that to create crimes. And I'm not saying that Mike Flynn was entrapped. Mike Flynn is an intelligent guy, should have been there with a lawyer. You don't lie to the FBI. But it is also true that the FBI likes to charge lying to the FBI even when there's no underlying crime. So Trump slams the FBI, and then he continues along these lines. He also tweets this: tainted. No, very dishonest. FBI agent's role in Clinton probe under review. Led Clinton email probe. Clinton money going to wife of another FBI agent in charge. So here's Trump going after the FBI. Now, there is something dangerous about going after the entire institution of the FBI. But to suggest that there was bias in the Hillary investigation, I think, is understating the case. As I said at the time, the idea that Mueller did not indict Hillary Clinton, or at least recommend her indictment, is pretty astonishing. Okay, so there is that. Then he went directly after James Comey. So Comey, why Comey is still in the news is really beyond me. I guess just because Comey, the suggestion is that he obstructed justice by firing Comey. But Trump says, I never asked Comey to stop investigating Flynn. Just more fake news covering another Comey lie. So Comey is the one who testified to that. Trump is now saying that he never told Comey to stop investigating Flynn. The evidence on Trump's side on this is that Comey didn't actually stop investigating Flynn, and even after Comey was fired, the investigation into Flynn obviously didn't stop. So it's possible that Trump said, I wish that you would see your way clear to letting Flynn go. He's not a bad guy. By the same token, that doesn't really count as telling Comey to stop investigating Flynn. I mean, Trump had the capacity to make that stop, and he didn't. And then he continued along smacking Comey. He said, after years of Comey with the phony and dishonest Clinton investigation and more, running the FBI, its reputation is in tatters, worst in history. But fear not, we will bring it back to greatness. So he's attacking the FBI, so another institution under attack. Now, Comey's not helping his case. So Comey goes out himself and decides that it is worthwhile to tweet. So now Comey's on Twitter. This is just what we need, everyone on Twitter. And James Comey tweets a bunch of pictures of people in FBI coats saying, I want the people to know this truth. The FBI is honest, the FBI is strong, and the FBI is and always will be independent. Me, June 8th, 2017. There is an account called Ben Shapiro Quotes. I do retweet it, but I don't actually quote myself. Okay, I'm not sure that I've ever actually quoted myself, like on Twitter like that. James Comey is, Trump called him a grandstander and basically an attention whore. James Comey is those things. So Trump goes after Comey as well. Then Trump goes after the media. He's not wrong to go after bias in the FBI. He's not wrong to go after Comey, by the way. And he's not wrong to go after the media. So he starts slamming the media too, particularly because of this retracted report from Brian Ross. So let's start with the actual Brian Ross report. So Brian Ross originally reported this about Mike Flynn and President Trump.
He's prepared to testify, we are told by a confidant, against President Trump, against members of the Trump family, and others in the White House. He is prepared to testify that President Trump, as a candidate, Donald Trump, directed him to make contact with the Russians, which contradicts all that Donald Trump has said at this point. As well, we're told that Flynn made the decision to cooperate only in the last 24 hours, that he is distraught about the decision but feels he's doing the right thing for his country, that he was facing huge legal bills of more than $1 million, and that he said that finally he had to go ahead and do this for that reason. He expects to put his house on the market. He is facing serious financial problems.
Okay, so Ross has been in trouble a few other times for getting the story completely wrong. Here he got the story completely wrong. It turns out that Flynn was not going to testify that candidate Trump told him to contact the Russians, but that President-elect Trump had told him to contact the Russians. That makes a huge difference. President-elect Trump telling him to contact the Russians is not a big deal. It doesn't go to the question of whether the Trump campaign was working with the Russians in the first place. So Brian Ross is forced to retract this. Here he is retracting this just over the weekend. He was then suspended for a month for getting this report wrong.
And, David, a clarification tonight on something one of Flynn's confidants told us, and we reported earlier today. He said the president had asked Flynn to contact Russia during the campaign. He's now clarifying that, saying, according to Flynn, candidate Trump asked him during the campaign to find ways to repair relations with Russia and other hotspots. And then after the election, the president-elect asked him and told him to contact Russia on issues, including working together to fight ISIS. David?
Before and after, and in the meantime, Brian, we do have a statement from Michael Flynn tonight. He said, I accept full responsibility for my actions.
That's right. And Flynn's confidant says Flynn's extremely angry at the White House tonight that he was going broke with crippling legal fees.
Okay, so we can let that go. Okay, finally, Trump goes after Brian Ross and the media, and we'll get to that in just 1 second. So Trump is lashing out at everyone. In part, I think justifiably. In part, he's making things worse for himself. When he lashes out this way, it makes him look like he has something to hide, even though he doesn't. I've said from the very beginning, from literally the outset of this, that when he fired Comey, it seems to me that the best possible explanation for what Trump does is incompetence, not malice. That usually it's about President Trump being angry at something that's going on, firing somebody, not about him just deciding that he wants to cover up some sort of nefarious crime. I'll get to all that in just a second. First, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at USCCA. So gun lovers, I have a huge announcement for you. How does a free gun sound? Well, you are in luck because right now the USCCA is kicking off December with a completely free gun giveaway for my listeners. It's not just one gun. You get 4 chances to win a Springfield Saint. It's the AR that you really want for Christmas. Ergonomic grips and enhanced stock designed to improve speed and accuracy. This is a fun gun and it'll help you defend yourself too. It's also an expensive gun, by the way. You should see it if you want to check it out. DefendMyFamilyNow1.com. That's DefendMyFamilyNow1.com. The digit 1. DefendMyFamilyNow1.com to check it out and be entered for free. You have 4 free chances to win, but that ends soon. Don't get left behind. Again, they're throwing in all the ammo that you need to break it in as well. So pretty awesome deal. DefendMyFamilyNow1.com to enter for free. Again, that's DefendMyFamilyNow1.com to enter for free, and you get a shot at winning a Springfield Saint, which is an awesome firearm. Again, help you defend yourself, help you defend your property, help you defend your freedom. And you get the chance to win when all you have to do is go over and register at DefendMyFamilyNow1.com and make sure you use that digit 1, DefendMyFamilyNow, digit 1.com. Okay, so So Trump slams Brian Ross. He goes after him here, too. He's not wrong to slam Brian Ross. Okay, he's right. Brian Ross was wrong here. Again, I'm not sure it's worth the president getting his hands dirty, because when the president does this, it gives off an air of desperation that I don't think is actually warranted here. He says people who lost money when stock market went down 350 points based on the false and dishonest reporting of Brian Ross of ABC News, he has been suspended, should consider hiring a lawyer and suing ABC for the damages this bad reporting has caused, many millions of dollars. I don't really think he wants to go here. The fact is the president of the United States has momentarily tanked various stocks over his presidency by naming companies and bashing them. If they can sue over Trump doing that, then they can also sue over Brian Ross, I suppose. Trump continues along these lines, and he says Trump goes after the media, he goes after Brian Ross. Not a shock there. And then finally he hits the Justice Department. He's still angry at his own Justice Department for not going after Hillary Clinton. And really he's mad at Jeff Sessions and the Justice Department for not protecting him from what he feels is a witch hunt. And here's what he tweeted. Many people in our country are asking what the Justice Department, justice in scare quotes, is going to do about the fact that totally crooked Hillary, after receiving a subpoena from the United States Congress, deleted and acid washed 33,000 emails. No justice. And then he tweeted along these lines again. He went after his own DOJ. He says, so General Flynn lies to the FBI. His life is destroyed. Crooked Hillary Clinton on that now famous FBI holiday interrogation with no swearing in and no recording lies many times and nothing happens to her. Rigged system or just a double standard? Again, I don't think he's wrong on all this. I just think that the louder Trump gets, the more it looks as though he has something to hide. And that's a problem for him. The best thing he could do right now is say, listen, the investigation should go forward. I didn't lie. Mike Flynn might have lied to the FBI, but it was about an underlying crime that doesn't exist. And then maybe down the road, when all that comes out is that it's a bunch of lied to the FBI charges with no underlying crime, he can always do the Scooter Libby, just commute everybody's sentence. To me, that seems like the best possible solution. But what's happening here is I think Trump is getting so upset about this that now he's thinking about firing Robert Mueller, the special counsel. Once you fire the special counsel, then all hell breaks loose because people are going to assume, rightly or wrongly, that you really do have something to hide. So whoever is around President Trump should be encouraging him today not to fire Mueller, but to be encouraging Mike Flynn that he's probably never going to serve a day in jail for lying to the FBI about something for which there's no underlying crime. Chris Ruddy, who's a friend to President Trump, says that Mueller is an existential threat to the Trump presidency at this point. That's true in the sense that the more of this builds up, the more Democrats might try to impeach him. But let me put it this way. If the Democrats tried to impeach Trump over Mike Flynn lying to the FBI over no underlying crime, I would oppose the impeachment. I think so would most Americans. Here's Chris Ruddy, though, saying that Trump is feeling really threatened.
At the end of the day, my view is that Robert Mueller poses an existential threat to the Trump presidency. He's gotten 4 major, 2 convictions, 2 plea agreements, lightning speed.
Okay, I don't think that he poses an existential threat to the Trump presidency unless you think that Trump actually has something to hide. If Trump does have something to hide, then it was Trump that posed an existential threat to the Trump presidency, not Mueller. That said, this does not look like this is an apolitical investigation by any stretch of the imagination. It looks like an investigation designed to elicit charges of lie to the FBI that is not designed to elicit actual underlying crimes. We were told this investigation was all about collusion with the Russians. Has there been any evidence of that? Has Mueller indicted anyone for any of that? Not that I can really see anywhere here. I mean, George Papadopoulos would be the closest thing to it, and even that is unclear as far as actual collusion. Okay, so I have a lot more to talk about. I want to talk about tax reform. I want to talk about a big Supreme Court case that is coming up tomorrow. We still have to do our Federalist paper because it is a Monday, so we have not done our assignment yet. So lots to get to. But for all of that, you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com and subscribe. For $9.99 a month, you can get a subscription to dailywire.com. And when you do, you get the rest of our show live on video. You get the rest of Michael Knowles' show live on video. You get the rest of Andrew Klavan's show live on video. Plus, you get to be part of my mailbag. And our 4th episode of The Conversation is coming up on Tuesday, December 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, featuring your favorite, parentheses me. Subscribe today to be a part of The Conversation and ask me questions, which I will either answer or mock or then answer in the order they are entered into the live feed. My conversation will stream live on the Daily Wire Facebook page and the Daily Wire YouTube channel. It'll be free for everybody to watch. Only subscribers can ask the questions. If you want to ask questions as a subscriber, log into our website, dailywire.com, head over to the Conversation page to watch the live stream. After that, start typing into the Daily Wire chat box, and I'll answer questions as they come in for an entire hour. Once again, subscribe to get your questions answered by me. me, the incomparable Ben Shapiro, on Tuesday, December 12th, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Join the conversation. Subscribe now so that you can ask the questions. Also, if you want the annual subscription, you get all those things, and you also get this, the finest in all vessels that hold beverages, the leftist cheers, hot or cold tumbler. You'll treasure it every moment for your remaining days on this earth. It is just spectacular. So you get all of those things. Or if you just want to listen later, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please go over to SoundCloud, iTunes, any place you listen to podcasts, subscribe, and leave us a review as well. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation. Alrighty, so a lot else to get to. President Trump has endorsed Roy Moore. I'm going to save that for things that I hate. But first, I want to get to tax reform passing. So all of this Flynn news has swamped what is the biggest accomplishment so far of the Trump presidency outside of the Gorsuch pick for the Supreme Court, and that is the passage of tax reform in the Senate. I've discussed sort of the merits of the tax bill before. I think it is a meritorious bill. I think there's a lot that is good to it. The Democrats are suggesting that it is just the worst thing ever. Patton Oswalt, the insufferable comedian who was also the voice of the rat, Remy in Ratatouille, he tweeted out, "Is there any going back after this tax bill scam to America? Does it matter now if Trump is impeached? There's no America now. Not the one we knew. Sorry, feeling real despair this morning." Wait, like I get to keep more of my own money and that ends America? That's like the end of it? Like we're done? Dunzo? Turn out the lights? Finished? Finito? Finito Mussolini? Like what in the world? It's okay. So after the Obamacare decision came down from the Supreme Court, I said that America had been fundamentally changed. The reason I said that is because a basic principle of Americanism had been ripped away. That principle was the government cannot force you to buy things. Right? Until then, the idea the government could force you to buy an entirely optional product with no externalities on anyone else. This is a brand new concept. And that fundamentally changed things. It violated my liberty. It installed a new tent pole for tyranny in the United States. I can force you to not buy anything I want, and I can force you to buy anything I want. That's full-on control of my life. Patton Oswalt, however, thinks that if I get to keep more of my own money, that this is the end of America. There's no America now. Now, listen, you cannot like the process by how this bill was passed. I'm not real fond of it. It was crammed through. It was done with handwritten notes in the margins. By the way, that's not as rare as it seems. There have been a bunch of Congress people who've done that before. The Dodd-Frank bill had handwritten notes in the margins. All of that said, it was rushed through without proper evaluation or debate. That was done because senators didn't want blowback, but it's a pretty typical Republican bill. I mean, it's not like there's anything groundbreaking here. The biggest problem with the bill is that it doesn't cut expenditures, which is really what I wish Republicans would focus on. Right now, Republicans inflate the deficit by cutting taxes. Even though the tax revenues in the long run grow, it may not make up for the tax revenues that are lost in the short run, meaning the government takes in less money. Democrats blow out the budget by increasing spending, even if they raise taxes. I don't think Republicans shouldn't lower taxes. I just think they need to pair that with some actual cuts, which I highly doubt they will do, and so we continue to kick the can down the road on our debt. But the idea that this is the end of America, it demonstrates that for the left, they truly believe, I mean, they really do believe, that it is the government's job to control your life, and anything the government doesn't do to control your life is bad for America. The more the government does to control your life, the better it is for America. I'll show you the proof. So Larry Summers is the former president of Harvard, former Clinton Treasury Secretary, and he predicted 10,000 people would die per year because of tax reform today on CNBC.
There's pretty clear evidence looking across different states and looking when health insurance has been phased in and out. When people lose health insurance, they're less likely to get preventive care. They're more likely to defer health care they need, and ultimately they're more likely to die. And it's very hard to quantify precisely. My piece explains why an estimate that thousands will die as a consequence of this bill is actually a very conservative estimate.
Okay, so the reason he says that is because the bill also gets rid of the individual mandate. It doesn't force you to buy health insurance. But the idea here is that if the government doesn't force you to buy health insurance and you opt not to, that is the same as the government killing you. That's insane. Okay, that means that the government didn't force me this morning to get up and wrap myself in bubble wrap. Right? The government didn't wake me this morning and say, you have to eat healthy today. That means the government is killing me. By not telling me what to do, the government is killing me. This is precisely the reverse of the notions of American liberty enshrined in the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. But it goes further than this. There are a bunch of commentators who are out there saying that it is irreligious. All these religious Christians who back the tax reform bill. What the hell is wrong with these people? So there's a guy named Jonathan Martin, or James Martin rather, who is a Jesuit priest, and he tweeted this out: "The U.S. will soon face the consequences of a tax bill that takes money from the poor to give to the rich. This is false. The bill does not take money from the poor to give to the rich. It allows rich people to keep their own money. It allows poor people to keep their own money. It says those who voted for it will face consequences later when they are judged. In hell, dun, 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 dun. It says, do you think Jesus' words about being judged on how we care for the poor don't apply? Think again. And then he brings the hammer. Boom. Okay, and he's not the only person who's speaking religious sophistry. There's a female rabbi named Danya Rutenberg, and she tweeted something out like, if the Bible is so against systemic solutions to poverty, why is a Jubilee year declared that releases people from debt to alleviate intergenerational poverty? What is leket, shichacha, peah, and maser, if not taxes meant to create a safety net for those in need? So in a second, I'm going to go through actually what the Bible says about taxes, but I first want to point something out. The Bible never says that it's the government's job to provide for the poor. It says that it is your job to provide for the poor. This is why religious people give significantly more charity than irreligious people. It's why conservatives give a lot more personal charity than non-conservative people. So all the people who are generous with everybody else's money by using the government as a cram-down mechanism for welfare, all those people are happy to use my money in the ways they see fit, but they are not willing to actually dip into their own pocket and make it happen. The reason that, whether you're talking about Jesus or whether you're talking about the Old Testament, all of the religious sources in Judeo-Christian history have been talking not about what the state should do, but about what you should do, how you have a religious obligation to help out the poor and the needy and the widow and the orphan. Okay, now I'm going to actually go through the Bible. So there are a bunch of people who have complained before about, well, you know, you're a religious person, Ben, you wear a yarmulke, and yet there are a bunch of things in the Bible that talk about taking care of the poor. Okay, now I'm going to go through that, and I'm going to show you what sort of taxes the Bible is talking about to take care of the poor. Okay, number one, the Bible talks about taxes explicitly twice. I'm talking here about the Tanakh, the Old Testament. It uses the Hebrew word, which is mas. Okay, mas means tax in Hebrew. It only uses it twice in the entirety of the Torah, in the prophets, and in the writings. Okay, it uses it with regard to the king Rehoboam, right, who is Solomon's son. Solomon raised taxes, and then his son raised taxes, and the actual effect of that is that the kingdom of Israel split in two because taxes were too high. Talks about that a little bit later in the prophets. And then Ahasuerus, in the Purim story, raised taxes at the end of the story, demonstrating his mastery over the far-flung domains. In neither context are the taxes seen as something good. The Talmud especially rips into the tax of Ahasuerus. Okay, now, let's talk about other biblical forms of tax. First, there's tithing. Okay, when it talks about tithing, specifically it's talking about something in Hebrew that's called Maser Sheni. Now, I know I don't want to get too abstruse here with the biblical teaching, but since I actually do read the Bible in the original Hebrew, I'm going to use some Hebrew terms here. Maser Sheni is tithing. That's the tithing that we always talk about for the poor. But here's what the Bible actually says about that in Deuteronomy. Okay, the original, there's actually two sets of tithing in the Torah. There's Maser and there's Maser Sheni. Maser literally means 1/10. So Maser and Maser Sheni. Maser is for the Levites. Maser Sheni is for the poor and the orphans and the widows. Okay, it only applies in the 3rd and 6th years of the sabbatical cycle, and it's 10% of produce. Okay, so that's a 10% tax every 3rd and 6th year for the widow and the orphan. Okay, then there's something called shichacha. That's when you forget a sheaf in the field. This is also in Deuteronomy. You're supposed to leave it for the widow and orphan. So you're walking around and you leave 1 or 2 sheaves for the widow and orphan. Okay, that's pretty de minimis. Okay, then there is leket and peah. These are referenced in Leviticus 19. Leket is referring to ears of corn that you forget on the ground. Same sort of thing. You're gleaning your crop and you forget an ear of corn on the ground. Leave it there for the poor. And then there is peah, which refers to leaving a corner of your field for the poor and the widow. Right? The minimum amount for peah is 1/60th of your field. So, at best, we are talking about a biblically mandated 11.7% of your produce every 3rd and 6th year. Okay, that's what the Bible says. To talk about how the Bible is saying, well, you have to give 100% of your everything to charity. It's nonsense. In fact, in Judaism, once you hit I believe it's 20% of your money to charity, you're supposed to think seriously about whether to give more than that because you're actually undercutting your own ability to take care of your family. Democrats are talking about maintaining tax rates of above 50%, okay? So don't talk to me about what the Bible says about taxes. Okay, then they talk about 2 further biblical provisions. There is Shemitah, which is the sabbatical year. Every 7th year, you leave the land fallow. The idea there was that the land is going to recover. And then there's Yovel. Okay, Yovel is every 50th year. All of the land sales that have been made in the prior 50 years revert back to their original owner. Both of these were supposed to get rid of loans. One of the problems that happened is that it turns out people stopped giving loans at all. So what did the rabbis do? The Talmud says that they designed something called a pruzbul, which was a basic legal workaround so that you could continue to lend, because lending ground to a halt. Also, the purpose of having all the land revert back to its original owners in the 50th year was not to create some sort of socialist system where you can't sell land or aggregate wealth. The purpose was they didn't want tribal land moving from one tribe to another. Yovel does not apply. The Jubilee year does not apply when all the tribes don't live in Israel and aren't separated by tribe. Okay, so there is your basic biblical breakdown. I know that's more specific than most people would want. But the idea that the Bible mandates that you are supposed to give enormous amounts of charity via government compulsion is just not true. It's not true in the slightest. Okay. Other big story today, final big story, and then we'll get to some things I like, things I hate, and the Federalist Papers. The other big story is that tomorrow there's a big case at the Supreme Court. It's called the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. So we've talked about this before. The Masterpiece Cake Shop case is a seminal one for both religious liberty and freedom of association. Basically, there's a guy named Jack Phillips. Jack is a baker in Colorado. He decorates cakes. He will make a cake for anyone. Gay couple, straight couple, green couple. Doesn't matter. He'll make a cake even for your gay wedding. What he won't do is decorate it in particular styles. He's not going to use his artistic skill in order to make a wedding cake for a gay wedding. So he's not going to decorate a cake that says, Happy Gay Wedding, John and Bob. Right? He's not going to actually take one of those cake toppers with two dudes and stick it on top of the cake. That's something that Jack is not going to do. So the leftists at the Colorado Civil Rights Commission said that Jack has to be forced to violate his own religious beliefs. As a result of their own ruling, he lost 40% of his business, more than half of his employees, all for abiding by his biblical beliefs. The left says the government should be able to force Jack to decorate the cake for the gay couple for their wedding. Okay, this is viscerally anti-religion. It's also anti-freedom of association. And Sarah Jones is a leftist columnist in the New Republic. Here's what she says, and I think this is right. She says, what Phillips wants is for the law to weight his personal beliefs about a person's intrinsic identity above that person's right to access a business. I guess that's fair. What Phillips wants is for his personal beliefs to be able to be invoked in his business dealings, as we all would like. Right? I don't think that if you're a leftist radio host, you should be forced to have me on your show. I don't think that if you're a leftist speechwriter, you should be forced to work for President Trump and use your artistry to that effect. I don't think that if you're a gay business owner, you should be forced to bake me a cake that says on it Leviticus 18:22. I don't think you need to do any of those things because I'm for freedom. Freedom only exists in the spaces where we acknowledge that we have no right to someone else's labor or approval. Tyranny grows when we refuse to approve those spaces. This is about tyranny. It's not even about religion. It's about, do you have the freedom to act in ways you see fit, even if others don't like it, and even if it means that others can't take advantage of your services? The answer is, was, and always will be constitutionally yes. That is why I believe fully that you are able to turn away whomever you want from your business. And yes, that includes for bad people, right? Racists can turn away people. Anti-Semites can turn away Jews. You know what will happen? I'll walk across the street. Racists can turn away black people. You know what will happen? They'll walk across the street, and those racists will go bankrupt. As I've said in 1,000 speeches at this point, the fact is that capitalism doesn't care about color. It doesn't care about creed. All it cares about is cash. And if you're turning away a vast bevy of clientele, you're undermining your own business. Okay. Time for things I like, things I hate, and then we'll go through a Federalist paper really quickly. So, things I like. So over the weekend, I had a chance to read some Elmore Leonard. I'd never actually read his stuff. I'd watched a little bit of the series Justified. If you watch that series, it's based on a short story called Fire in the Hole. Elmore Leonard is a crime writer. He's really quite good. I really enjoy his writing. He's very straightforward. He's not deliberately obscure. So I've read a couple of really good crime writers in the past couple of weeks. Don Winslow, whose early stuff, I read one of his books that I didn't like very much. The Life and Death of Bobby Z wasn't very good. But his book on the cartel was great. And Fire in the Hole is another very, very good book of short crime stories. There's a reason that Elmore Leonard is a best-selling author. Check it out. Elmore Leonard, Fire in the Hole. It's kind of old. It's kind of Westerns. It's basically Westerns. And they're pretty great. Okay, time for some things that I hate. All right, so the thing that I hate today is that the president has endorsed Roy Moore. The president came out and tweeted that he supported Roy Moore and that you should support Roy Moore too. He then called up Roy Moore personally and lent his support. Has anything changed from when these allegations were originally made about Roy Moore for child molestation? The answer is no. Nothing has changed. It is certainly possible the president of the United States could go around saying, don't vote Doug Jones. Right? Don't vote Doug Jones. You want to vote right in? Whatever. You want to vote for Roy Moore? All right. But don't vote Doug Jones. He could have said that. Right, and just made it into a lesser of two evils choice. By overtly endorsing Roy Moore, it is very difficult to escape the public perception that you're poo-pooing the actual child molestation allegations. Now, the Democrats have no leg to stand on here since they're going to let Al Franken sit in the Senate after we have pictures of him trying to grow up a woman's breast while she's sleeping. The Democrats don't have much of a leg to stand on so long as John Conyers is in Congress, so long as Bill Clinton is still an honored member of their society. That said, is this good for the country? No, it's not good for the country when you're going to have an alleged child molester sitting in the Senate. He's probably going to win. And I think that he'll be seated. I think that the idea that the Senate is going to not seat him is foolish. I think now they'll seat him. Now that Al Franken is staying, he'll be seated. And you see that Mitch McConnell is making those moves too. Here's Mitch McConnell in Alabama saying, we'll let the people of Alabama decide whether he ought to be seated.
Well, I think we're going to let the people of Alabama decide a week from Tuesday who they want to send to the Senate, and then we'll address the matter appropriately. I've already said in the past that I thought this was a matter that would have to be considered by the committee. Ultimately, it'd be up to them to make that decision, and they'll make it depending upon whether Judge Moore ends up coming to the Senate.
Do you believe that Judge Moore should be in the Senate?
I'm going to let the people of Alabama make the call.
Yeah, it's a move by McConnell in the wrong direction. So we've seen all these politicians basically futzing over these allegations. First, you had Nancy Pelosi defending John Conyers. Now you have Mitch McConnell basically defending Roy Moore. Everything is getting worse and worse on this score because no one is willing to take a moral stand and take a temporary loss. You do wonder, back in 1993, I think it was, David Duke ran for Senate in Louisiana, and the Republicans said, we would rather you vote for the Democrat than David Duke. You do wonder today if the Republican Party would do that, or if the Democratic Party would do that if the case were reversed. We may be so partisan that we're beyond saving here. Okay, so quick correction. So last week, even during my corrections, I screwed up a correction. So now I'm going to correct another thing. As I try to make clear, folks, I'm trying to, when I make a mistake, at least I try to fix it. Okay, so Theresa May, I said, was selected on the basis of her being pro-Brexit. That is not true. She didn't actually have a position on the referendum. She had been, I guess, sort of anti-Brexit, but then when she came in, she pledged that she was going to enforce Brexit. I had a guy named Richard who wrote to me, and he says, as Home Secretary, Theresa May took the position of the UK government and endorsed Remain, but what made her position sufficiently ambiguous to get herself selected by both sides of the Conservative Party was the fact she didn't take an active part in campaigning for Remain. Okay, I hope I have corrected this to everyone's satisfaction now. Okay, now I'm going to go briefly through Federalist Papers. So Federalist number 6. So we are gradually making our way through the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers are very long. There are 85 of them. We are now through number 6, so we are gradually making our way. The first 5 Federalist Papers, or at least 3 of those 5, were basically devoted to why America should be one country. Now we're going to talk about the possible conflicts between the states and why you need a stronger centralized government than the Articles of Confederation could provide in order to prevent conflict between the states. So what's really fascinating in this one is Alexander Hamilton writes it. Hamilton is, of the 3 guys writing, the best writer. Hamilton's a very lucid and powerful writer. And Hamilton makes the case against the idea that the states will be at peace without a strong central government. There are a bunch of people who said, why do we need a strong central government? All the states will get along. Well, in doing so, he actually debunks a couple of very popular 20th and 21st century notions, the idea of democratic peace theory, that democratic countries don't fight each other, and the idea that countries that do commerce don't fight each other. So he debunks both of these, which is really interesting because I agree with Hamilton. He says the genius of republics, say his opponents, is pacific, meaning that they are peaceful. The spirit of commerce has a tendency to soften the manners of men and to extinguish those inflammable humors which have so often kindled into wars. Commercial republics like ours will never be disposed to waste themselves in ruinous contentions with each other. Meaning this is what they've often called the McDonald's arches theory of diplomacy, that countries that have McDonald's and free commerce are less likely to go to war with one another. He says they will be governed by mutual interest, will cultivate a spirit of mutual amity and concord. But then he says, have republics in practice been less addicted to war than monarchies? Are not the former administered by men as well as the latter? The founders are constantly focusing in on human frailty, human weakness, and human flaw, and that's why the Constitution is such a grand document. He says, are there not aversions, predilections, rivalships, desires of unjust acquisitions that affect nations as well as kings? In other words, democracy is not a cure-all for war, which is obviously true. We've seen democracies go to war with one another. Hitler was an elected official. And the Soviet Union originally was a popular movement. It was a minority popular movement, but it was popular. Most, as I've said before, virtually all fascist nations in the West started off under democratic auspices before power was either seized or democratic means were used to elevate a bad guy to power. Sparta, Athens, Rome, Carthage were all republics, says Hamilton. 2 of them, Athens and Carthage, of the commercial kind. Yet were they as often engaged in wars, offensive and defensive, as the neighboring monarchies of the same times. Meaning being a commercial republic is not going to save you. And then he says, from this summary of what has taken place in other countries whose situations have borne the nearest resemblance to our own, what reason can we have to confide in those reveries which should seduce us into an expectation of peace and cordiality between the members of the present confederacy in a state of separation? In other words, if we don't have a strong centralized government, the states are going to be fighting each other in 5 seconds. Have we not already seen enough of the fallacy and extravagance of those idle theories which have amused us with promises of an exemption from the imperfections, weaknesses, and evils incident to society in every shape? He says there's always going to be conflict. That's why we need to band together against all outsiders instead of banding together against each other. He says it's time to awake from the deceitful dream of a golden age. I love the realism. And to adopt as a practical maxim for the direction of our political conduct that we, as well as the inhabitants of the globe, are yet remote from the happy empire of perfect wisdom and perfect virtue. And this is so different from how the left thinks, that human beings are capable of something great. This is why we have to have a world government. This is why, if every man were left to imagine in John Lennon's style, everything would be all better. The founders were ultimate realists, and that's why their words are still important, because while we may have different notions of how government ought to work, they were more correct than we, because our notions of human nature are worse than theirs. Okay, so now we have reached the end of today's show. There will be a lot more to discuss tomorrow. As always, I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. The Ben Shapiro Show is produced by Mathis Glover, executive producer Jeremy Boring, senior producer Jonathan Hay. Our technical producer is Austin Stevens, edited by Alex Zingaro. Audio is mixed by Mike Cormina. Hair and makeup is by Jesua Olvera. The Ben Shapiro Show is a Daily Wire Forward Publishing production. Copyright Forward Publishing 2017.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I hope you'll stick with us tonight for our 3 hours. I think you agree it was worth it on Friday. Many people are repeating today what we said the other day, and that's good. We're going to discuss a little bit impeachment, because that's where all this is headed. If you'll allow me, let us please set this up, not because I said these things months ago, but because I want to make a very, very important point about impeachment. There will be few other hosts, few other outlets, few other platforms where an individual knows as much about this as I do. Throughout my career, I've studied the Constitution. But let's begin the day after Election Day, November 9, 2016. The election recall was November 8th. Again, there's an important reason that I'm going through this. It's not self-aggrandizement. Count one, go. Let me tell you what the Democrats mean to do to you, Mr. Trump. They intend to sabotage you. They intend to sabotage you every step of the way and then blame you. They intend to look for every opportunity to criminalize the politics that swirls around you. And they're good at it, and they do it. And if necessary, they intend to try to impeach you. Trust me when I tell you this is their agenda. They are vicious. They are ideologues. They have a Soviet-style mentality. They will not allow an election to get in their way. Okay, that was November 9, 2016, the day after the election. The day after. 2 days later, 3 days after the election. 3 days. Cut to, go. And they will lay in wait, as I also told you, the day after, Tuesday, Wednesday, by my calendar, that they will try and lay the case for the eventual impeachment of Trump. I'm quite serious about this. You watch. Mark my words. Circle the date on the calendar. Wednesday passed. They're going to spend the next 2 years, after maybe a month or 2 or 3 or 4 of smiling as they sharpen their knives, they're going to spend the rest of the 2-year period doing everything they can to create scandal, to create controversy and provocation. Anybody who serves in this administration is going to be fair game. These leftists use the same tactics as the Marxists. You see them in the streets now? You think these billionaires like Soros are just going to go away? They're already plotting. They're already meeting in their little hotel rooms. They're already doing the things that leftists, radical kooks do. You think they believe in the system? They only believe in the system if they win. They don't accept defeat, ever. And Schumer's the worst of the bunch. And they're plotting right now. Mark my words, they are plotting right now, trying to figure out ways to bring down this administration. Even before The week is over. And so is Obama. November 11, 2016. Then, 3 days after the president is sworn in the inauguration, I return to this issue of impeachment. Cut 3, go.
The same Praetorian Guard media that protected Obama every step of the way, all of his scandals, his horrendous lawlessness. Now they're all over Trump. They've sent every cub reporter and everybody above. Everywhere they can go, find dirt, take the guy down. And they're working closely with somebody, ladies and gentlemen, I believe. A malcontent, a miscreant by the name of David Brock. And over at the Washington Free Beacon, Joe Schofstall has a piece, confidential David Brock memo. This is Media Matters for America, a.k.a. Media Matters for whatever. Defeat Trump through impeachment. Now, I've been telling you about this on radio and TV now for a long time. They're going to try and build up scandals. They're going to try and create ethics issues, probably with his business activities. That's where they are, or his tax return, whatever it is. They're going to look. They're going to fight. This is what they're good at. Soviet-style tactics against their opponents. Chuck Schumer and his crowd, they're not honorable people. They're the opposite. They're dishonorable people. Like David Brock, that little puke. A confidential David Brock memo obtained by the Washington Free Beacon lays out the ways the Democratic operative plans to use his numerous organizations to take down President Donald Trump through impeachment. Remember, this fool is also funded or has been funded in part by George Soros. Brock is currently at the Turnberry Isle Resort in Aventura, Florida, for a weekend conference with more than 100 major liberal donors. Attendees are mapping out a course to combat the newly sworn-in president. According to the private, you know what, I have to say this. I'll hold my tongue. According to the private and confidential memo, Brock plans to defeat Trump, quote, through impeachment, unquote. I'll say what I meant. These are like the brown shirts of the left. What did he say? He didn't say anything close to what Judd said. The brown shirts of the left. Okay, call them red shirts. Whatever you want to. No other progressive organization has the resources and assets, I'm quoting, that American Bridge has amassed over the past several election cycles to hold Trump, his administration, and the politicians accountable, says the 44-page confidential memo. Only Bridge, that's his group, only Bridge stands ready with staff already hired. Trump's web of business, Trump's web of business ties mapped out, and a massive video archive at our fingerprints. So they're going to use the fact that the man is a successful businessman and try and get him all caught up.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, in June of this year, June 15th, after Mueller had been appointed and he began his crusade, let me go to February 13, 2017. I used a phrase that I have used before, which has now been picked up by others, to define what the ultimate purpose here is. This is February 13, less than a month after the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was sworn in. Cut 4, go. All of Trump's staffers don't have clean hands. All of his administration officials don't have clean hands. A lot of this stuff comes from the inside, but a lot of it comes from Obama holdovers. That's the plan. I'm telling you, they're coordinating this. Schumer holds back as many of these cabinet officials as possible. The Obama flunkies have weaseled their way into the bureaucracy, and they have no intention of leaving. You've already read, and we talked about it last week, of these clandestine avenues of communication within the bureaucracy because they don't want to be found out by the president or by people like us through the Freedom of Information Act. This is a silent coup. That's what it is. This is an effort to, whether you agree with all his policies or not, and I don't agree with all his policies, but I do agree with several of them. Whether you do or not is not the issue. The point is we have like an underground or a shadow government going on here. We have two former presidents who do not know their place because they are relatively young men, or they were when they're president, and they are, may I say, Clinton and Obama, really punks. That's the way I view it. Very immature narcissists and nihilists. And they're not going to allow something like an election, particularly through the Electoral College, to get in their way. Bill Clinton's furious his wife didn't win. even though he's mistreated her more than any other human being on the face of the earth. Barack Obama's furious that Hillary didn't win because now he's concerned about his agenda, not about America, not about the country. So I've been pointing out this impeachment mentality from day one, that it is in fact an attempt at a coup, a silent coup. You'll remember the left became incredibly violent, including at the inauguration. They started to attack the Electoral College, any process that fails to deliver them an absolute victory. And now we have Special Counsel Mueller. He shouldn't be called Special Counsel. The proper name for Mueller now is Special Impeachment Counsel. Special Impeachment Counsel. Back in June, I reiterated what the goal was here, impeachment. And that now Special Impeachment Counsel Mueller, a report that he would issue, not a formal report, because he's not an independent counsel, but a report, a statement of some sort, depending on how he files his open court papers and so forth, will be aimed and are aimed at impeaching Donald Trump. From June 15 of this year, cut 5, go. So why would they be investigating the President of the United States for obstruction of justice when, number one, it's an impossibility in this case, since he has the constitutional power to fire any inferior officer for any reason. And number two, the facts, even if he didn't have that power, simply do not justify it. If that's the purpose of the special counsel's investigation, among others, and if it is the official position of the Department of Justice that you cannot indict a sitting president, then you know what Robert Mueller's doing? Do you know, Mr. Producer? He's going to write a report one day. You'll read this at National Review in 3 months. Stick with me. He's going to write a report one day, which he knows, which Comey knows, which Schumer knows, and they're all friends, those three. They're all tight. Will be used as the basis for impeachment if they can win the House of Representatives. Mr. Mueller may be investigating individuals and so forth, but his purpose for being unleashed against the President of the United States is to make the case for impeachment, not indictment. This is very, very important to understand. This is why the Democrats are so enthusiastic about him in particular and about that position, and why they want it as broad as possible. This is the plan. I don't doubt it for a minute. That was almost half a year ago. Almost half a year. Now, why am I raising all this? To show you how smart I am? Not at all. What is impeachment supposed to be about? What is impeachment supposed to be for? It's not to impeach a president and then seek to remove him from office for policy disputes or differences of opinion or errors in judgment. It's not supposed to be used by the legislature, the Congress, to paralyze a president and paralyze his administration. It's not supposed to be used for superheated partisanship and political purposes. And yet from day one, this has been the position of the Democrat Party and the media and the left. Impeachment is supposed to be an absolute last resort for addressing a president outside the criminal justice system, addressing a president who has conducted himself in a way that significantly, if not overwhelmingly, does damage to our constitutional system or does serious injury to our republic. I've heard people say, well, you can impeach somebody for anything. That's not the history of impeachment. That's not what impeachment's supposed to be about at all. This isn't Britain, where impeachment was ubiquitous, where impeachment applied to any public official. This isn't a battle between a parliament and a king. We have separation of powers. Separation of powers. And this separation of powers system is teetering on disaster. And it's been for a long time. When the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, acting as the Acting Attorney General of the United States, appointed Robert Mueller as special counsel to investigate essentially all things, he violated, in my view, the construct of the Constitution. It's one thing to have a special counsel with a very, very specific mandate to assist the Department of Justice in its work. It's quite another to unleash a special counsel without a specific mandate who can rove the countryside looking for crimes or alleged crimes on all matters against all people. That's not our constitutional system. That's not how it's supposed to work. Mr. Mueller has no constitutional foundation, none whatsoever. He is a creation. He is a figment of a super partisan time in our history, and he simply does not, moreover, have the temperament for this job. He's like a hamster on a hamster wheel who keeps running, just keeps running in place, running. Pick off as many people as he can, no matter what the so-called offense. Punish them, brutalize them, break them emotionally and financially in order to achieve some end, which is, in this case, the impeachment of the President of the United States. The Democrat Party knows exactly what it's doing. The Democrat Party doesn't give a damn about the Constitution. They defended Barack Obama and his multiple violations of the Constitution. They defend federal district judges and appellate judges who are regularly violating the Constitution. More on that on the immigration issue in a little bit. So the Democrats wanted a special counsel not to uphold the Constitution, but to continue to destroy it. And Mr. Mueller and his hand-picked group of hacks, many of whom contributed to Hillary and or Obama, and there's a special FBI agent you've heard about all day, and I'll get into that. This entire enterprise has as its purpose not to uphold the rule of law, but to destroy a presidency and further degrade our constitutional system. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Situation here where a roving prosecutor who believes himself to be answerable to nobody is doing the bidding of a political party, of a movement, and was appointed by a deputy attorney general because the attorney general recused himself. The deputy attorney general also did not follow Department of Justice guidelines by giving him a very, very broad mandate and failing to rein him in. So this is a rogue special impeachment prosecutor. That's exactly what he is. You're going to hear people say that impeachment is a political question. That's only good to some extent. It goes further than that. Impeachment is a constitutional question. And the members of the House, like the members of the Senate, like the President of the United States, like all federal employees, take an oath to uphold the Constitution. To say it's a political question means that you can try and remove a president for any reason, which of course would completely subvert, if not eviscerate, the whole notion of separation of powers. So it's more than a political question. It's a constitutional issue. More when I return.
Liberty's voice, Mark Levin. Talk with that voice now. 877-381-3811.
Now the focus seems to be zoning in on the firing of James Comey. Now, isn't that ironic? There is no dispute whatsoever that the president can fire the head of the FBI. The president nominates the head of the FBI. And the president and the FBI director has a 10-year term. The reason the FBI director has a 10-year term wasn't because of concern that he or she might be overly influenced by a president, and so, they get these long terms. No. The reason they got a 10-year term was to hope that they were independent. James Comey has demonstrated he was not independent. his handling of the Hillary Clinton eavesdropping case, among other things. He's also demonstrated that he's the one who should be in the dock. Stealing government documents? That's what he did, you know. I wasn't stealing the jewelry from the house. I was only borrowing it. I wanted to take it, to a social event. No. You can't steal documents and then claim you put them back. Now, in the case of the government, it includes copies of documents. That's the government's proprietary information. Mr. Comey knew it, and he took them anyway. He made copies, and he gave some to third parties, including the New York Times, through a subterfuge, and he knew the New York Times shouldn't have had those documents, and we don't know to whom else he has leaked. But a nice grand jury appearance has a way of getting people to reveal themselves. So what is it exactly, this obstruction of justice that's being talked about? He interfered with the Russia investigation? Does it look like anybody interfered with the Russia investigation? The deputy director of the FBI, who became the acting FBI director when Comey was rightly kicked out of office, said at the time before the House committee, I believe, or a Senate committee, that they had plenty of resources and nobody had stopped them and they were continuing. There's no direct order from the president, even though he could, by the way. There's no direct order from the president. None. And we have Mr. Mueller. Mr. Mueller has not brought a single case, a single charge against anybody for colluding with the Russians to help the Trump campaign during the campaign. Nothing. Zero. So what's the obstruction? That he might have? Now, as for Mr. Flynn speaking to the Russians, and by the way, dozens of other countries, which is never mentioned. Russia was one of the countries. At the reported direction or alleged direction of another senior official, it really doesn't matter who it was. People are saying, oh, this is a violation of the Logan Act. Well, nobody believes it's a violation of the Logan Act. Nobody. Except left-wing kooks, some of whom are members of Congress and some of whom may work for Mr. Mueller. A law that was passed in 1799 has never been successfully used against anybody. And, of course, as I keep pointing out, Mr. Flynn was not your average citizen conducting foreign policy. He wasn't conducting foreign policy at all. And he certainly wasn't an average citizen. He was coming in a senior position of the incoming administration, as everybody knew. The phone call, I believe, was made December 29th, 3 weeks before Donald Trump was to be sworn in. So there's nothing untoward about this. Nothing ahistorical about this. Nothing. Certainly nothing illegal or criminal about it. Mark Toner, Obama State Department spokesman, on January 13, 2017, 7 days before Donald Trump was sworn in, was asked about this by Matt Lee of the Associated Press. You know, Flynn contacting other governments and so forth, including Russia. See, it was known back then. And here's what he said. Cut 6, go.
Probably have seen reports starting yesterday, but then more of them this morning about contact between the incoming national security advisor and the Russian ambassador. I'm just wondering, from the State Department's point of view, is this something that's of concern at all, or I'll just leave it there and then follow up?
Again, not necessarily. I've seen the reports. I don't think they've been confirmed or corroborated yet. But that's as he's part of the transition team. That's really for them to speak to and how they are engaging. I mean, the president-elect is also engaged on his own with many world leaders. So I don't want to speculate, and I don't want to.
So there's nothing. This building doesn't see anything necessarily inappropriate about contact between members of the incoming administration and foreign officials, no matter what country they're from, right?
No. And again, this has been ongoing. I mean, we stand ready if they want to work through the State Department to contact some of these individuals, but we have no comment or no problem with them doing such on their own.
Absolute non-issue. Then ask yourself, you're Robert Mueller, and you're hack prosecutors, and you're sitting around, and you have access to a transcript, if not an actual recording, of Mike Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador. We know this. It was either through the FISA warrant or through the backdoor gathering of information on the Russian ambassador, who is being eavesdropped upon, and the unmasking of Mr. Flynn and the felonious leaking of his identity by somebody on the inside to the media. There's a felony. I'm sure that Robert Mueller will follow up on it any day now. Now, in interviewing, just to show you how nefarious this guy Mueller and his staff are, in interviewing General Flynn, they knew what General Flynn had discussed with the ambassador of Russia. They knew there wasn't any collusion. They knew, as a matter of substance, there wasn't any violation of anything. A traditional discussion. In this case, it was about the UN resolution that was being pushed by the Obama administration on the way out the door to eviscerate Israel. It was really the Obama administration at the last minute who was doing very, very untoward things that prior administrations had never done before. And it really doesn't even matter what Flynn discussed, unless he was hatching some criminal scheme, and he wasn't, because he wasn't charged with that. He didn't plead to that. So when they questioned General Flynn, they already knew about General Flynn. They already knew what he discussed with the Russian ambassador, so it was a setup. And unfortunately, General Flynn apparently fell into their trap. Now, keep something in mind. General Flynn was fighting them tooth and nail, day in and day out, until he ran out of money, apparently, until it was crushing the family emotionally. They were threatening his son, and he said, that's enough. So it's not like Mueller's really seeking the truth. Mueller's seeking destiny, a legacy. Mueller's acting out of power and politics. The goal, again, is to write some nasty document in some form and to condemn the president, who, after all, fired his dear friend Jim Comey. Now, as for the firing of Comey, we all know that if Hillary Clinton had been president of the United States and fired Jim Comey, she would be lauded by the Democrats and the media. We also know 1 second before Donald Trump did in fact fire Jim Comey, the Democrats demanded his head. And then after Trump fired him, as I said at the time, they will use this. It's more important for them to now reverse course, prop up Comey, build him into some angelic figure, a Joseph story, if you will, and then go after Trump for obstruction. This has been their position from day one. We have a little montage of Democrats calling on Comey to resign before Trump fired him. This could have gone on for 20, 30 minutes, but we shorten it. Cut 7, go.
The FBI director, okay, you violated these 2 protocols.
That kind of an ambiguity bomb this close to election was a terrible lapse in judgment.
I agree with Eric Holder. I think here Director Comey made a great mistake.
I call it an October betrayal of long-standing FBI protocol.
He was acting in concert and coordination with the House Republicans. End of story.
I think that Comey acted in an outrageous way.
Should he step down?
I think he should take a hard look at what he has done, and I think it would not be a bad thing for the American people.
Do you believe that Jim Comey should resign, Senator Reid?
Of course.
All I can tell you is the FBI director has no credibility.
The president ought to fire Comey immediately, and he ought to initiate an investigation.
Maybe he's not in the right job.
So, yes, that was her, Nancy Pelosi, Nadler, Maxine Waters, Harry Reid, Bernie Sanders, James Carville, Barbara Boxer, John Lewis, Adam Schiff, Tim Kaine. They all condemned him. They all condemned who he was, what he had done. Several of them wanted him out. Trump fires him, and then they go, oh, the great Jim Comey? A professional? A man who's supposed to be independent from the president, which, of course, is absurd. The great Jim Comey? Oh, my gosh, firing him. Trump must have fired him because he wanted to stop the Russia investigation. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no Russia investigation anymore. There's no Russia investigation. Robert Mueller is not conducting a Russia investigation. He's not conducting a collusion investigation. He's off to the races. He didn't find anything under the Russia collusion Trump rock, so he's looking under other rocks. There's no evidence whatsoever that they're conducting a Russia investigation. They're conducting a Trump impeachment investigation. They are an arm, in effect, a legal arm of the Democrat Party in the House of Representatives in the United States Senate. Mr. Mueller is a special impeachment counsel. It's it. That's it. That's it. You can thank Rob Rosenstein, who appointed him and gave him a wide berth in terms of what he could investigate and will not pull it back. The evidence is overwhelming that Mueller has moved on, that he's not conducting a Russia collusion investigation. It's also overwhelming on the political side when Democrat after Democrat after Democrat are now arguing obstruction of justice, not Russian collusion. They won't even use those phrases anymore. You couldn't stop them before. But now you see it's obstruction of an investigation of Russia. An investigation of nothing. There was nothing there, and one isn't even going on anymore. When we come back, I'll give you examples of that, too. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Mrs. Fields cookies. Now, if you're like me, your favorite part of going to the mall as a kid was stopping by Mrs. Fields. It'll probably be your favorite part of going holiday shopping this year, too. Something about that first soft bite of the perfect chocolate chip cookie just makes you feel like a kid again. So this holiday season, you can give your friends and family that same feeling of pure joy with a holiday gift arrangement from Mrs. Fields. Mrs. Fields has been around for 40 years, and her cookies are unbelievable. Everyone knows and loves them. Remember the very first time you had one? It's like you finally knew what a chocolate chip cookie should taste like. They're so soft and chocolatey. Just thinking about those cookies makes my mouth water. And Mrs. Fields cookies, they're handmade, every one of them. They're freshly baked. They're ready to enjoy right out of the box. So everyone can have what they've always wanted right now. Now here, I have an exclusive for you, my beloved listeners. Go to MrsFields.com, MrsFields.com. Do it right away. Click on the microphone at the upper right-hand corner and enter code Levin, L-E-V-I-N. You know what happens? You save 20% on any Mrs. Fields product, including their best-selling Peace, Love, and Cookies tin, which comes with holiday favorites like Nibbler's bite-sized cookies, brownie bites, and more. And I happen to know this is great because I ordered it for my family, and we had it during Thanksgiving. Just click on the microphone, enter promo code Levin, L-E-V-I-N, to get 20% off site-wide at MrsFields.com. MrsFields.com, promo code Levin. Boy, oh boy, what a combination. They love to bake the cookies. I love to eat the cookies. All right, Mr. Producer, let's begin our painful march through liberal malcontent land. Diane Frankenfeinstein on Meet the Depressed. Cut 9, go.
As you know, I'm ranking on Judiciary, and the Judiciary Committee has an investigation going as well, and it involves obstruction of justice. And I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice. I think we see this in the indictments, the 4 indictments and pleas that have just...
Whoa. The case of Manafort and Gates has to do with their financial activities in the past, well before this campaign. They're failing to report their as foreign agents, which has never been successfully prosecuted, maybe once in the entire history of the country, or the history of the regulation. So that has nothing to do with obstruction. Mr. Papadopoulos, his plea on one count of false statements. I hope everybody realizes, while it's important to tell the truth to federal authorities when you're asked, assuming you put yourself in a position where you're going to be asked without a lawyer, bad advice, but if that's what you do, you need to tell the truth. Now, that said, if you're looking into this broad systemic conspiracy of Russian involvement in the election to help elect Trump, and the Trump people are all involved in it, this is Mickey Mouse stuff, absolute Mickey Mouse stuff for federal prosecutors. This is like the bottom rack. You can't go any lower than this. One false statement. It's not even perjury. You understand? It's not even obstruction. And they pulled the same thing with a general, Flynn. No, there's no example of obstruction of justice. Obstruction of justice of what? Go ahead.
The comments that are being made, I see it in the hyper-phonetic attitude of the White House, the comments every day, the continual tweets.
See, ladies and gentlemen, she's laying out a case which would drive the framers absolutely crazy. She doesn't like Trump. She doesn't like his tweets. She doesn't like his comments. So she wants to remove him from office. They have always wanted to remove him from office because they never felt he should be in office. And not just him. Some of the dug-in fools that used to work for Bush, some of the dug-in fools that pretend to be conservatives, it's pathetic. They won't even stand up for the Constitution. They won't even stand up for what's right, even if they dislike the man, even if they disagree with the man. Go ahead.
And I see it most importantly in what happened with the firing of Director Comey. And it is my belief that that is directly because he did not agree to lift the cloud of the Russia investigation. That's obstruction of justice.
Isn't that incredible? She claims it's obstruction of justice. First of all, the Senate Judiciary Committee has no authority to do any criminal investigations. They're the legislative branch. You know what they do? They write stupid bills and they run up the debt. That's number one. Number two, it has nothing to do with obstruction of justice. There have been more investigations inside the executive branch and outside the executive branch of this so-called Russian collusion. She doesn't even use that phrase anymore. But if the firing of Jim Comey, the purpose of the firing of Jim Comey was to interfere with the Russia investigation, then why did Tim Kaine, Adam Schiff, John Lewis, Barbara Boxer, James Carville, Bernie Sanders, Harry Reid, Maxine Waters, Gerald Nadler, and Nancy Pelosi favor firing Jim Comey? Were they obstructing with some investigation, too? Of Russia? I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. These programs require 3 hours. I apologize. We have to take our time and march through this stuff. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. The senior levels of the FBI have been politically corrupted. If that's what the president meant, the president is correct. And it amazes me. The media had no problem when Barack, Milhouse, Hussein, Obama, and Herrick, held in contempt, Holder, were trashing local law enforcement. We're nationalizing local law enforcement. We're racializing local law enforcement, and so forth and so on. That was considered magnificent, an advancement for civil rights, and so forth and so on. When this president points out what is obvious to everybody now, that the senior levels, I'll interpret what he was saying because I believe it's correct, the senior levels of the FBI are politically corrupted, I don't think there's any question about it. You had McCabe, the number 2 FBI director involved in the investigation of Hillary Clinton, at the same time his wife's running for state senate in Virginia with the backing of a Hillary Clinton friend, counsel, advisor, and political, supporter. That is Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat governor of Virginia. And he poured through his various organizations and so forth $500,000 into a state senate campaign. McCabe didn't tell anybody. It was later found out. And, of course, he should have recused himself from everything. But he didn't. Now we see the lead investigator in the Hillary Clinton espionage case, who gave her a pass, who rewrote the statute from gross negligence in the handling of classified information to specific intent in order to save her, the lead investigator, where there were 20 or so top witnesses who weren't interviewed while a memo was being prepared by Comey to let her off the hook. Incredible, right? The lead investigator is a Trump hater. Not only was the lead investigator in the espionage case, he's been a lead investigator for Mueller, at least up till and through much of the summer, on Donald Trump world. Turns out he's texting anti-Trump stuff with a lawyer in the FBI who he's having an affair with, an extramarital affair with, and the FBI still hasn't released the texts, and Mr. Mueller still hasn't released the text. As a matter of fact, this whole sordid spectacle of the politicization of the senior levels of the FBI and the politicization of the special counsel's office has been kept from the House Intelligence Committee, where the chairman, a hero, I think, Devin Nunes, has been demanding for months to know why this specific FBI agent was removed from his job. He's been trying to get to the bottom of that. Adam Schiff doesn't give a damn. The Democrats don't care. They'd probably cheer this FBI agent. But Mr. Mueller never told them. In fact, isn't it interesting? In the same 24-hour period, the New York Times and the Washington Post both came out with a story about this FBI agent saying almost the same thing, essentially the same thing. That is a leak from Mr. Mueller or his office or the top levels of the FBI to position this outrageous event. In addition to having an FBI agent like this on staff. Don't tell me they just found out about it. It was the Inspector General who found the texts. The Justice Department Inspector General. Mueller has hired people who have exactly the same viewpoint. 9 of his 16 prosecutors, 16, donated to either or both the Obama and Hillary Clinton campaigns. Now, why would you bring people on like that? Well, we know why. He wanted them not only to be among the greatest hacks out there, but he wanted them to be ideologically identical to himself, because he is, after all, the special impeachment counsel. So when the president talked about the FBI, he was correct, and it was fascinating to see Eric Holder jump to the defense of the FBI. Eric Holder, who has eviscerated law enforcement, Eric Holder, who was held in contempt by Congress, all of a sudden, he's a character witness. He has no reputation, or the extent he has when it's a lousy reputation. Trashing law enforcement his entire career. Now they act like they're pro-law enforcement. And it turns out, ladies and gentlemen, this FBI agent, this top agent, his name is not an easy one. It's S-T-R-Z-O-K. Zarczak. Peter Zarczak. Top level. One of the great FBI investigators, were assured by the New York Times and the Washington Post. But he couldn't get Hillary. Helen Keller could have gotten Hillary, but he couldn't get Hillary. And Trump, obstruction. Obstruction of what? And you see, here's what happened. Trump disrupted these politically corrupt, or the politically corrupt levels of the FBI. He disrupted it by firing Comey. They were happy. They were doing their thing. And he fired the guy. And now they're striking back. They've got their buddy Mueller in there, a former FBI director. They're defending Comey, a former FBI director. They're leaking like hell all over the place. And, of course, the contemptible Praetorian Guard media, rather than seeing the tyranny of all this, celebrates it because they hate Trump. They want him out, by all means. So Devin Nunes, who is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, has been demanding information for months about this situation, And he has to read about it in the New York Times and the Washington Post. New York Times and Washington Post. Obstruction, you see. You heard Feinstein. Dianne Franken-Feinstein will meet the depressed. Now, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who is a regular guest on the Morning Schmo and Mr. Schmo show, even though the man lied through his teeth about being a Vietnam combat veteran. Yeah, look at this schmo. Vietnam combat veteran? Anyway, here he is, Senator Blumenthal. Cut 10, go.
We're at a real testing time for this country when people are going to either speak up and stand up and challenge the President of the United States, or they won't. The White House is a very heady place. Power is a very powerfully addictive drug, and Donald Trump is a very formidable personality. But
stop. So far he has said nothing of substance. Rambling on like a homeless person. Go ahead.
To stand up to him, and I hope my Republican colleagues in the United States Senate will take the lead on this issue and also on obstruction of justice. There is a credible case of obstruction of justice against Donald Trump.
So all the Democrats in the Senate have met, and now this is it, and in the House, obstruction of justice, obstruction of justice, obstruction of justice. The intent here is to take out this president in a silent coup, but also, in the meantime, to paralyze him. To paralyze him, his senior staff, his administration, people looking over their shoulders, people pointing fingers at each other, people leaking against each other. It's to disrupt this administration. It is straight out of the Marxist playbook. It really is. Alinsky, more than Alinsky. It is to disrupt a legitimate administration, legitimately elected, no Russian collusion, and to create criminal behavior. Create criminal outcomes. Concoct impeachable offenses. This is the silent coup I've been talking about. And, of course, on the Morning Schmo with that big dope, they're given voice. Because he doesn't give a crap about the country either. He thinks Manhattan is the whole country. Representative Ted Lieu, another schmo, out of California, also on MSNBC. Cut 11, go.
So there appears to be two tracks here. You can go down the legal track, or you can go down the political track towards impeachment. Which one do you think is the president, or should the president be more concerned about?
This woman's name is Alex Witt, a.k.a. Alex Witt-Liss. Look at the assumptions in her question. I'm telling you, folks, the left is playing with fire. The media are playing with fire. The Democrats are playing with fire. They go through with this, 1/3 of the country, because 1/3 is, oblivious to everything, and the other third is, of course, out to turn America into something else. They're going to have 1/3 of this country in such an anger mode, such fury. They're playing with fire because they will not accept a 4-year term for this man who was elected legitimately and hasn't committed any crimes and hasn't violated the Constitution. Not even close. Not even close. The reason in the first hour I played what I said back then was to point out that this is all a subterfuge. It is a pretext to remove a man from office. There's only a handful of honest liberals left. Why do you think Dershowitz is all over TV on this stuff? He sees exactly what I see. Why do you think McCarthy's writing there at National Review? He sees exactly what I see. I see exactly what they see. And I can go on and on and on. You think Dershowitz voted for Trump? He voted for Hillary. I think McCarthy was a never Trumper. I can't remember. He's a dear friend of mine. We all see it. This is an attack on republicanism. It is an illegitimate attack on a legitimate president. Now, we put up with Obama for 8 years, but they refuse. They refuse to accept Trump. That's exactly what's going on. Go ahead.
I think it's closer to him right now.
Well, we know that for Richard Nixon, he was not brought down because of the underlying crimes. He was brought down for obstruction of justice. That was the first article of impeachment. The second article was dereliction of duty. And we're seeing that here today. We're seeing the President of the United States commit obstruction of justice in plain view.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Richard Nixon directed a cover-up of the Watergate break-in. They even moved monies around from the campaign to re-elect the president, or creep, as they call it. And maybe it is that Mueller thinks he's Archibald Cox or whomever. But Ted Lieu is an idiot. But it doesn't matter if he's an idiot. This is what they're doing. Go ahead.
And I think we should let Special Counsel Mueller's investigation continue forward. He is getting closer every day that goes by, and it may be a very
See, Mueller hears this stuff, and he loves it. He says, here we got the Democrats. They support us. Let's keep plowing ahead. After all, most of my staff made up of Democrats. They feel the same way and so forth. And we got to get to the bottom of this crime, ladies and gentlemen. What crime? What crime? What does Trump have to hide? Nothing. Then we have Adam Schiff, a regular on ABC and the rest of these programs. Stephanopoulos. Here's the irony here. This is one of the reasons you have nothing but contempt for the media. Stephanopoulos was a hatchet man for Clinton. And now you have Stephanopoulos dressed up as a journalist speaking to a hatchet man for Pelosi. Adam Schiff. So I told you, don't watch any TV this weekend. There's no point in it. Cut 12, go.
His attorneys are starting to take it a step further. They're Jay Sekulow to the New Yorker, to Jeffrey Toobin to the New Yorker, laying the groundwork that collusion, even if it were shown, is not a crime.
Well, it's not a crime. Do you have a... first of all, it hasn't been shown. Secondly, it's not a crime. This isn't an antitrust case. Doesn't even mean anything. What do we mean by collusion? Go ahead.
The president has to deny something 3 times in a row raises a profound question about whether it's true. Now here, I think you see the most palpable evidence of a collusion in terms of violating the Logan Act.
Okay, so now we have the Logan Act. The Logan Act. Most of you never heard of the Logan Act. Passed in 1799. The goal was to discourage individual citizens from claiming to negotiate foreign policy on behalf of the new country. Fairly new country. It's nothing to do with what took place here. You have an incoming president with a transition team where Flynn is asked to reach out to a number of governments, including the Russian government, but not exclusively the Russian government, on behalf of the incoming administration. The Logan Act doesn't even have any application to this. But Adam Schiff is a hack. And so they give him voice on ABC News. They should dismiss these people as nutty. But they won't dismiss them as nutty because they want you to hear them. Go ahead.
Now, I agree that's not likely to be prosecuted, but let's look at that. You have the Trump transition conspiring in private with the Russians to subvert the bipartisan policy of the United States, which was to sanction Russia over its interference in our election.
Can you believe this guy was once a prosecutor? I feel sorry for anybody that had to deal with this guy. So the Trump transition is conspiring in private with the Russians to subvert the bipartisan policy of the United States. Did not Mr. Toner, the former Obama spokesman, 3 days before the president was sworn in, say that they have no problem with the incoming administration speaking with people like that? It's done all the time and so forth and so on. And yet Mr. Schiff finds a conspiracy in private with the Russians to subvert the bipartisan policy of the United States. Go ahead.
And so the question becomes, if they're willing to work secretly and privately at odds with U.S. policy during the transition...
All right, forget that. Go to cut 13. Go.
And if Michael Flynn were to testify that these contacts with the Russians were directed by the president, what would that tell you? Because we all know that during transitions, administrations have contacts with foreign officials all the time.
Well, what that would tell me is that one of the reasons that he was intervening, the president, that is, with James Comey, was that he knew that this would come to light and that he wanted to protect Mike
He knew
Flynn.
that it would come to light? that he directed a subordinate to talk with a foreign government? That's perfectly legitimate. Otherwise, we got to bring Barack Obama into court and put him in prison. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I want you to hear Susan Collins. You tell me she isn't a saboteur. On Meet the Press, cut 14, go.
I'm curious, the scope, does it include the transition? Because I know the scope's about the campaign. Does that include the transition?
Yes.
You believe the scope of the Intel Committee does include the transition? Everything up till January 20th or even more?
It not only includes the transition period, it includes the campaign period.
Right.
And that's why we're looking at the conversations that occurred during that period as well.
Do you have a sense of where Mueller is in his probe? Do you feel as if this is the end of the beginning, beginning of the end? Where do you guys have a sense of the length of this probe right now?
Although we're in touch, or the chairman is in touch with the special counsel, it's very difficult to say. But clearly he is making progress. He's had guilty pleas from 2 individuals. He's had 2 other indictments. So he is making progress.
He's making progress. This idiot is part of the problem. It's absolutely unbelievable. I'll be right back.
Conservative and proud of it. Call the Mark Levin Show at 877-381-3811.
Now, prior to last Friday, I seem to recall there were daily reports of politicians and Hollywood types, mostly liberals, mostly Democrats, who were exposing themselves, who were giving sex toys to each other, who had buttons under their desk to lock the door from within in order to molest interns and things of that sort. Apparently that doesn't go on anymore, Mr. Producer. Apparently it's all cleaned up. The, as they call it, sexual harassment training, that was pretty fast. And so we don't hear about members of Congress now. We don't hear about people in Hollywood molesting, groping, assaulting, battering. We don't hear it anymore. Because now, this week, it's obstruction of justice week. All these Democrats, and you can Google them yourselves, all these Democrats, one after another, who wanted Comey out, were they obstructing justice? When they were pressuring for Comey to leave, demanding his head, were they obstructing justice? Were they obstructing the investigation into Hillary Rodham Clinton and her violations, serial, multiple violations of the Espionage Act? Were they obstructing justice, ladies and gentlemen? Should they be expelled when they're not committing acts of sexual molestation? Getting a good night's sleep, that's easier said than done, of course, especially if you hear a noise downstairs. What do you do in that situation? You could turn on all the lights and keep watch. You can sleep with one eye open, or you can rest easy, knowing that your home and family are protected with Simply Safe. Each Simply Safe system is a complete security arsenal, with motion sensors, glass break sensors, entry sensors, and a high-definition security camera. You'll have everything you need to keep your family safe. Order Simply Safe online in just minutes. Have it on your doorstep this week. Set it up in under an hour. No tools, no hard wiring. Just open the box, plug it in. You'll be protected with professional home security. With Simply Safe, there are no contracts. There are no hidden fees. And 24/7 professional monitoring is just $14.99 a month. Get Simply Safe and get some rest. Go to simplysafemark.com and get a special 10% discount when you order today. That's simplysafemark.com for 10% off your order. Simplysafemark.com. I guess they changed it again, huh, Mr. Producer? I thought you had to go to simplysafemark.com and enter code MARK. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I suspect you need to go to simplysafemark.com and enter code MARK. Just as a matter of logic. I know there's a lot to go through here, but it is very tawdry what's taking place. Very tawdry. Now, Nancy Pelosi. Oh, yes, stretch. Nancy Pelosi, of course, is she's trying to call these people off from impeachment. You remember back in November. No, don't talk about impeachment right now. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Wait till we take the House. Remember her? Cut 15, go.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says that if you and the Democrats take the House back in 2018, the first thing you will do is impeach President Trump. Is that true?
No, I believe that whatever we do, we have a responsibility, first and foremost, to unify the nation. Second of all, you can't go down any path without the facts and the law. If that's there, perhaps it will come out in these investigations.
All right, so you get the drift. So, but we know Maxine Waters has been out there day in and day out. I'm not going to waste your time with her. Now, you've probably heard by now 4,000 or 5,000 times about Brian Ross and ABC's World News Tonight on Friday. If you listen to my radio show on Friday, you'll know I called him out immediately because he had the timeline wrong. Remember that, Mr. Producer? Called him out immediately. He was reporting that the President of the United States told Flynn to contact the Russians during the course of the election. Now, if he had, that's still not illegal or unconstitutional retroactively. Look how we have to talk about this nonsense. Turns out it was December 29th, as I recall, which would be well after the election and soon before the president's swearing in and inauguration. That would be Trump. Most of the major media ran with this, even though Brian Ross had one anonymous source, probably the ghost that sits on his shoulder. And they ran with it and ran with it. And here's cut 19. Here's what he said, as I recall. Go.
He has promised full cooperation to the Mueller team. He's prepared to testify, we are told by a confidant, against President Trump, against members of the Trump family, and others in the White House. He is prepared to testify that President Trump, as a candidate, Donald Trump, directed him to make contact with the Russians, which contradicts all that Donald Trump has said at this point.
All right, that's enough. So obviously he didn't do that. And Brian Ross has a habit of making things up, as I pointed out Friday. And I pointed out Friday how wrong he was, that's not what's been reported. That's not what took place in open court either. So it was wrong. So then they had to clarify. Cut 20, go.
And, David, a clarification tonight on something one of Flynn's confidants told us, and we reported earlier today. He said the president had asked Flynn to contact Russia during the campaign. He's now clarifying that, saying, according to Flynn, candidate Trump asked him during the campaign to find ways to repair relations with Russia and other hotspots. And then after the election, the president-elect asked him and told him to contact Russia on issues, including working together to fight ISIS.
Oh, working together to fight ISIS? We can't do that. But anyway, the guy's a buffoon. He's an absolute buffoon. He's been suspended without pay for 4 weeks. He should be fired. He should not have a job again in journalism. He should be a tenured, professor somewhere where you can do this sort of stuff. Although apparently they can do it in the media too. All right, Mr. Producer, your call on the calls, as I don't have my call screen up. Who do you recommend? Do we have anybody who disagrees with my genius so far? Yeah. Ian in New York, the great WABC. Go.
I'd like to. James Comey testified before Congress that Trump told him any bad satellites that are in my orbit, go after them. That sounds like somebody that's not obstructing the man. And then the FBI agent, all these liberals wanted to push the agenda that Comey was looking for more money to go and Trump fired him because he was looking for more money. And the head FBI agent testified before Congress that that's not the case. It did not go down like that. It had nothing to do with the investigation investigation of being looked at. So Comey is just a flat-out liar, and that's already just like Klavan, just like Brennan, all three of them. They're liars, and they get caught up. How are you obstructing? What's impeachable when you tell somebody the opposite? Go after anybody around me that's doing something bad. That's what he told Comey. And Comey, because...
I got it. You already said it, and those are excellent points, Ian. Excellent points. Thomas, Somerset, New Jersey, the great WABC. Go.
Hey, Mark, thank you. First of all, I wish you really good health in the upcoming year. We really need you to fight to the left. But I called mainly to compare Robert Mueller to that previous rogue prosecutor named Michael Nifong from some years ago when he faked up that case against the Duke lacrosse players when the evidence was clearly not there, and he ended up getting prosecuted himself. I really think there's the man that could stop this, Mark, is really the man that started it all. And I know you think highly of him, but Jeff Sessions put us in this hot water and needs to get us out of it. What do you think?
Well, what kind of question is that? What do you want him to do? Now that he's recused himself, you want him to unrecuse himself?
No, I want him to say that Robert Mueller is acting in a fictitious and malicious way and needs to step down.
Okay, and then what? And Mueller says, screw you.
And, well, we need to overpower him. I mean, you would know better than me.
Well, you're asking me questions. I can't make things up. I would know better than you. Let's walk through this together and see how rational your argument is. The guy, Sessions, recuses himself. If you listen to this program, you know I strongly disagreed with that, didn't I? So he recused himself. So the acting Attorney General is Rob Rosenstein, who appoints Mueller. I strongly oppose that, too. Now you say, well, Sessions should denounce it. Well, where does that get us? And then you say, well, you know what he can do. Well, what can he do? Nothing.
The lead attorney in the United States, he needs to...
He's not the lead attorney in the United States on this matter because he recused himself.
Well, but if Mueller...
So to answer your question, so you can make some sense out of this, it would be the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, who is the acting Attorney General for these purposes, who can fire Mueller.
Thank you. I was looking for it to connect the dots for me, but Mueller's acting illegally and needs to go.
Well, he's not acting illegally. He's appointed unconstitutionally, and you're asking the guys who appointed him unconstitutionally to fire him for acting the way he's acting. You understand?
If he's acting...
Thanks for your call. I'm getting a headache. Getting a headache. Think about it logically. Why would the guy who appointed him fire him? The guy who appointed him obviously wanted him. The guy who appointed him gave him this wide, broad berth for investigating. He doesn't view Mueller acting illegally as we do. So I don't understand the question. There's no answer to it. The president has the power to fire Mueller. They'd impeach him in 2 seconds. Listen to Susan Collins. The Republicans would bail on the president, the same Republicans, in many respects, who want him to fail in the first place. Sessions is recused. Does he sound like, in any respect, in any of the interviews he's done, that he's going to undo that? No. So legally, who's left? The Deputy Attorney General who appointed Mueller. Does it sound like he's going to do anything? No. I'm not here to make smiley faces. I'm here to deal with reality. I'm dealing with reality. The main thing that has to happen here is to hold the House of Representatives. To hold it. Now, does that get you to the polls? Does that excite you? It ought to. Not because they're so great, but because you want to uphold the Republic. You want to uphold the Constitution. But to argue with me and go back and say the very people who created this scenario, the people who need to get us out of this scenario, that's not going to happen. That's childish. It's just not going to happen. You can repeat it over and over again, call me and repeat it over and over again. It's not going to happen. Ed, Garden Grove, California, on the Mark Levin app. How are you?
Hi, fine, thank you, Mark Levin. I am retired medic leaver Marine Corps, did 8 years, and got hurt.
Thank you, sir, very much.
The only thing I got to say is that Republicans have been brain dead. Mark, they got to listen to you. We got to go to the polls.
Yeah, well.
But let me tell you one more thing. When these Democrats start inventing lies like they have been of collusion, when they very well opened up our borders and are derelict in keeping us safe, and also what they've
Can I
done
is more? The Democrats have a decades-long history of colluding with the Soviet Union.
That's true too, sir.
Did that ever bother them before?
I'm sorry?
That never bothered them before. They undermined our effort in Vietnam. They undermined Reagan when he was trying to defeat the Soviet Union through economic might, and they called it Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative. When he wanted to put those Trident missiles in Europe and Germany in particular, they were part of the nuclear freeze movement. I mean, on and on and on. They gave a lot of aid and comfort to the Soviet Union. Now, all of a sudden, they're concerned about Russia. Let me ask you a question, sir. Who was it that paid for the dossier where the ex-British spy worked with Kremlin apparatchiks to take out a president, to take out a nominee? Was that not the Hillary Clinton campaign, sir?
Yes, it was.
Was that not the Democratic National Committee, sir?
It sure was.
Was that not a Democrat lawyer by the name of Mark Elias, I think his name is, the bag man, the straw man, the go-between, to cover up for Hillary Clinton and the DNC? Was that not him?
It sure was, sir.
Okay, there's our Russian collusion right there, is it not?
Yes, sir. And we also got collusion with opening the borders. He went with Jorge Ramos.
All right. Let's stick with Russia now, because that's what they're calling. Tell me, was it Trump or his children or his second cousin twice removed? Or was it Trump and his campaign officials or his transition officials who were cutting a deal with Vladimir Putin to get control of 20% of America's uranium production? Tell me, which party did that?
The Democratic Party, sir.
Tell me, which candidate as Secretary of State did that?
As Secretary of State.
Hillary Clinton. So there's your collusion. Collusion number 2. Is that under investigation? No, it's not under investigation. And I can go on and on about these creeps. Thank you for your call. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Decision a couple hours ago by the United States Supreme Court. The vote was 7-2, with Ruth Bader, ACLU Ginsburg, and Sonia left-winger Sotomayor, the 2. The Associated Press, the Supreme Court is allowing the Trump administration to fully enforce a ban on travel to the United States by residents of 6 mostly Muslim countries. Of course, the AP would prefer if they're mostly Jewish or mostly Christian or mostly secular, but so be it. The justices, with 2 dissenting votes, said that the policy can take full effect even as legal challenges against it make their way through the courts. The action suggests the High Court could uphold the latest version of the ban that Trump announced in September. The ban applies to travelers from Chad, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. By the way, none of them is even close to the country with the largest Muslim population. So there are about 20 other countries, majority Muslim populations, give or take, that are not even covered. But, of course, the lib media will never tell you that. What's that? Oh, yes. Folks, Uber disclosed a breach of 57 million passengers and drivers' records. Hackers accessed personal information like names and driver's license numbers of the drivers and names and email addresses and phone numbers of passengers. Though this breach was just recently announced, this personal information was actually stolen over a year ago. Over a year ago. If you're only monitoring your credit, your identity can be stolen in ways you may not detect. Good thing there's LifeLock. LifeLock detects a wide range of identity threats, threats you may miss by just monitoring your credit, like someone stealing from your 401k or committing a crime in your name. And if there's a problem, a U.S.-based identity restoration specialist will work to fix it. No one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses. But LifeLock can help you see more threats to your identity. Here's what I want you to do. Go to LifeLock.com or call 1-800-LifeLock. Use promo code Levin, that's Levin, for 10% off your LifeLock membership. Visit LifeLock.com and save 10% now. So, there's no fanfare, there's no breathless reporting by the media that the Supreme Court of the United States, not 5-4, 7-2, agrees with Donald Trump. With Donald Trump on his last iteration of the travel ban, overruling multiple federal district judges appointed by Obama and certain appellate courts like the Ninth. Understand, the Supreme Court 7-2 upheld Donald Trump's decision, his executive order. For weeks it went on. What a racist he is. They just upheld it.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I'm trying to get our Levin TV episode for tonight up early because it's going to be in front of the subscriber wall. The entire episode, which is almost an hour, will be free to everybody as I dig into this Mueller impeachment, obstruction of justice, and all the rest of it because I think it's so important. I want all of you to have access to it. So as soon as we get it, we will link to it. Mr. Producer, why don't you continue to look into that, if you will? I would appreciate it. Now, we will continue to move. The President of the United States did something that is fantastic again today. This is another reason why they want to get rid of him. The so-called monument designation under the Antiquities Act has been abused by almost every president, but especially Barack Obama. This is where they take millions of acres of land, seize it from state governments, seize it from private property owners, and the federal government decides it's going to manage it. Now, I can tell you as the Deputy Solicitor of the Interior Department many, many decades ago, the federal government does not have the capacity to manage all this land. It simply does not. It barely manages properly what it already has. It cannot. And so the President of the United States gave multi-millions of acres back to the state of Utah. I don't know that this has ever been done, but it is a wonderful thing. They have used this law to lock up hundreds of millions of acres of land and water under strict federal government control that most people are not allowed to use. Now, there are people out there who will say this is a great thing. It's a great thing that a president, like a dictator, can suddenly say all this land is going to belong to the federal government. Really? Well, you know, we need to keep land pristine out there. We need to have some areas that are pristine. You want to know why my book, Liberty and Tyranny, sold over 1.5 million copies? Not ghost-written, not researched by others, and all the rest of it. It's because of the information that's in it. I go back to it all the time, even though it's getting old. Homeowners, farmers, businesses are subjected to a host of government restrictions and prohibitions that reduce the use and value of their properties, including laws relating to wetlands and endangered species. Among the most far-reaching enviro-statist strategies is smart growth, where urban planners develop comprehensive zoning initiatives that purport to bring man back into balance with the ecosystem by severely restricting private property rights. And their focus is typically suburban sprawl. The urban planner's purpose is to force populations into increasingly limited, dense areas, drive cars off the roads, and increase use of public transportation or bicycle and pedestrian paths, bring the home and office closer together, establish a communal existence. Just how problematic is suburban sprawl, or for that matter, development generally? In 2002, 15 years ago, the Heritage Foundation, I would encourage the Heritage Foundation to update this now, the Heritage Foundation's Dr. Ronald Utt examined the federal government's land use surveys, and here's what he concluded. After nearly 400 years of unmanaged development and rabbit-like population growth, somewhere between, listen to this, because you'll know it and nobody else will, somewhere between 3.4% and 5.2% of land in the continental United States has been consumed. You wouldn't know that because the illiterates in the media, who are the mouthpieces for the left, want you to believe that we're running out of land. After nearly 400 years of unmanaged development and rabbit-like population growth, somewhere between 3.4 and 5.2% of land in the continental United States has been consumed. But what of the heavily urbanized states, which include several of the original colonies? Utt looked at them specifically. And he said in both New York and Virginia, which were settled in the early 1600s, nearly 90% of the land is still undeveloped, while in Pennsylvania the share is over 85%, and in Maryland it's over 80%. In contrast, both New Jersey and Rhode Island's developed areas hover at around one-third of the available land, some of the highest shares in the nation, but still leaving both states with about two-thirds of their land undeveloped or in agricultural use. But that's not good enough, you see. And this is in 2002. I suggest to you it's gotten a lot worse since in terms of land that's been taken out of public use, private use rather. 25% or more of American land, of American, is controlled by the federal government. By the federal government. And it's inching closer and closer to 30%. This is how presidents try to make impart a legacy for themselves. It's an enormous amount of land. You look at some of these states out west, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, you know, you're talking over 50% of the land mass. Over 50%. That's truly crazy. Absolutely crazy. And if you don't support this, well, what are you, an idiot? You don't believe in protecting the land and the animal? Of course we do. But we don't want to give up 25, 30, 35, 40% of America to the federal government. The federal government doesn't manage things well. The federal government doesn't manage parks well, as a matter of fact. I can tell you this. I know I'm quite familiar with the Department of the Interior. Federal government doesn't manage wilderness areas well. It's the same federal government, the same rules, the same bureaucracy, the same civil service regulations and so forth that apply to these people. They always claim they don't have enough money and they don't have enough manpower. Well, of course. Now, here's the president. Let's go to Cut 22 in Utah and Salt Lake City today. Cut 22, go.
Because some people think that the natural resources of Utah should be controlled by a small handful of very distant bureaucrats located in Washington. And guess what? They're wrong. The families and communities of Utah know and love this land the best, and you know the best how to take care of your land. You know how to protect it. And you know best how to conserve this land for many, many generations to come. Your timeless bond with the outdoors should not be replaced with the whims of regulators thousands and thousands of miles away. They don't know your land, and truly, they don't care for your land like you do. But from now on, that won't matter. I've come to Utah to take a very historic action, to reverse federal overreach and restore the rights of this land to your citizens.
What the president's doing here is outstanding. What the president did and won in the Supreme Court on temporary limitations on immigration from certain countries, given their terrorist activities or their lack of a friendly government, or the lack of any government, was outstanding, and it was upheld by the Supreme Court today. When I met with the president a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't planning on meeting with him, but the vice president took me over there to meet with him. We had a wonderful meeting, and among other things, I told him he's what I've told you folks on the air. He is the most conservative president since Ronald Reagan. Since Ronald Reagan. Neither of the Bushes would have done what Trump did today. And he and his legal team fought like hell all the way to the Supreme Court to defeat these rogue district court judges and the rogue Ninth Circuit when it came to a garden variety executive order which is intended to protect the American people when it comes to certain countries and immigration. He fought him all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won. McGahn, his counsel, Sessions, the Attorney General in this case, excellent. Excellent. It would be nice if some of the Bushies would acknowledge this, but they won't. Or some of the never-Trumpers would acknowledge this, but they won't. See, I'm an always America, and always Republic, and always Constitution. That's what I am. I don't have to agree with Trump on everything, but I find myself agreeing with him on a hell of a lot. I really do. I really do. I disagree with this whole tax scheme that the House and Senate have come up with and that he supports, and I say so. But boy, oh boy, he does a lot of things that I strongly agree with on a policy front when it comes to the courts, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to North Korea and Iran and Israel, when it comes to regulations. He's got the right mindset on taxes. Unfortunately, the Republicans aren't delivering the right bills. They just aren't. He's the right mindset on Obamacare. And I'll tell you what I told him, because this is not violating confidence in this regard. I won't tell you anything else. But what I told him was, you know, Mr. President, I've said this to you on the air, and I've told my listeners, you're not a philosophical conservative per se. You're not an ideological nationalist populist. You're a man who's 70 years old, who's lived life, was a Democrat, then a Reform Party guy, I believe, then a Republican. And you look at these things, and your conclusions are conservative conclusions. Given all your experience, what you went through in the campaign now, how you reason these things. And he didn't disagree with me. There are people who seek to project themselves onto this president. Oh, he's the most conservative president. He doesn't really view himself that way. Oh, he's a nationalist populist. He doesn't really view himself that way either. He views himself, I think, I'm not speaking for him, but when I was there, as I explained it. And as it turns out, when you mature, when you think, for all of us, think things through, look at human experience, America's experience, think about liberty, think about these things, you tend to be a conservative, because conservatism is about the improvement of American life, of human life, I should say, improvement of human life, based on experience. And I think that's the case with this president. And so what he's done here is outstanding with respect to Utah. Obama did a lot of these things the way out the door. When he was dealing with Israel, when he was dealing with Utah, when he's doing these things, he just piled up regulation after regulation. He wanted to enshrine these things, impose them on the future government and so forth. And Trump has said, no, I'm not putting up with it. I got rid of your FBI guy. I don't have to keep your FBI guy. I'm the President of the United States. I don't have to keep your immigration policies. I don't have to keep these regulations. I'm going to give Utah and the people of Utah their land back. And I think this week, I read somewhere Wednesday, he may well do something else that's incredibly historic, not just for this country, but for the world. He may recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That's a big deal. Maybe with the embassy to follow, but that's a big deal. You wouldn't have gotten that out of Jeb Bush or Lindsey Graham or John Kasich or anybody else that I can think of. Maybe Cruz, I'm not sure. But I know Trump, if he follows through with these reports, he will have done it. He will have done what none of the others would have done. By the way, including Reagan. And maybe it wasn't the time during Reagan. Maybe it was. But it is the time now. And Hamas is threatening, and the Arab countries are threatening. Too bad. Too damn bad. They're not happy unless every Christian and every Jew is removed from the Middle East. That they can claim control over every piece of property, every ancestral site, and then they'll kill each other, which is their history. No offense, that's a fact. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Lindsay, Wyoming on the Mark Levin app. Go.
Hi, Mark. First off, I want to start by saying we love you here in Wyoming, and
Thank
it's
you.
an honor to speak with the great one.
Thank you.
What we wanted to say was we thought what Trump did today was wonderful and historic and such a great thing for Utah, and we're just really hoping that he can do that for Wyoming also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that would be great, but of course he's coming under attack, as he does. Anytime you start to even a little bit, unravel what the progressives have done, you go against the grain. You'll even be attacked by people who claim to be supporters. Here's what's going on, Lindsay. Most people in the country have never been to Wyoming. They don't know what's in Wyoming. They don't know what Wyoming produces. Most people in the country want gasoline when they can immediately. They assume it'll be at the pump. They want oil immediately to heat their homes. They assume it'll be in their homes. It's like going into grocery stores. We assume the meat's going to be there. We assume the fish is going to be there. We assume that the wine, I don't drink, but the wine's going to be there. We assume everything's going to be there, the fruit, the vegetable. But nobody wants to really know how these things come to be. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to know how they get a wrapped package of meat, beef. I don't want to know. Nobody wants to know, what it takes to produce these things. They just want it. They want it immediately, and they want it cheap. Well, guess what? Some people have to actually start the process. Some people have to raise the cattle. Some people have to raise the corn, grow the corn and the wheat. Some people have to transport it. You like gasoline? Some people have to drill for oil. Some people have to drill for natural gas. It has to be refined somewhere. And then it has to be trucked or trained somewhere. This is how we get our stuff for a consumer society. But nobody wants to know. So these presidents come in, they just start nationalizing this, nationalizing that, taking it out of the control of the states. People can't even use these lands anymore because we're told, we're using all our land. I just gave the statistics that demonstrate quite the opposite. That's what's going on.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm glad I've convinced you. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. I got to go to Wyoming one day. I want to go to Wyoming. I want to go to Montana. I want to go to these places. South Dakota, North Dakota. I mean, it has to be the summertime. Don't get me wrong when I go to those places. These are places I want to go to. I already told my wife, when we're retired, we're going to get an RV and we're going to travel some of these places. All right, folks, I'll be right back.
When Mark Levin was a kid, his teachers didn't like his snide sense of humor. Today, they still don't like it. Call Mark Levin now at 877-381-3811.
You know, I'd say it's embarrassing, but I guess it's not. When I hear our folks, so-called conservatives, and I don't hear them a lot, but now and then on TV or radio, say things like, well, the bureaucracy's getting bigger and bigger, and the courts are getting bigger and bigger and far more powerful, and democracy's getting smaller and smaller, withering on the vine. I scratch my head. Where have these people been? I think I mentioned this in every single book I've ever written, except Rescuing Sprite. From Men in Black and Liberty and Tyranny all the way through my current book, Rediscovering Americanism, which came out this summer. I have an entire chapter, The Administrative State Tyranny. But through all the books, Ameritopia, the Liberty Amendments, the whole point of the Liberty Amendments, one of the Reform Amendments, is to address this permanent administrative state, or the swamp, as the president and others call it. This has been a point I've underscored now since I've had a microphone, since I've written books, since I've, been a public figure, even before that this is a grave danger. And you hear me on the radio talk about this constantly. When the left wins elections, they claim to have a mandate. When the left loses elections, they turn to the unelected parts of the government, the courts, and the bureaucracy. Even in Rediscovering Americanism, my latest book, I have an entire list in there showing how many laws were made by Congress from 2003 to 2016 and how many laws came out from the bureaucracy. It is shocking. It is stunning how little of what goes on in this country has anything to do with republicanism. Anything to do with republicanism. Then I talk to people, conservatives, including some in think tanks, who tell me, if we would just elect more Republicans. Well, yes, things will be better, perhaps, but we have this unelected stuff. Now, we're celebrating the 7-2 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court a few hours ago, upholding the president's final iteration of his immigration limits on these 6 mostly Muslim countries. And yet we have to sit here and wait for a Supreme Court decision. Is that what the Constitution says? No, nothing like it. And people are shocked. Well, Men in Black, if you read that book, and it's quoted all over the place even now, the first book I ever wrote discusses that. What's going on with the courts? With a few exceptions, like today's decision, you have effectively, in many districts in this country, a judicial tyranny, particularly in the highly populated areas. What do you think Ameritopia is all about? The disconnect between constitutionalism and these other ideas that are pushed and forced upon us by the left, among others. So I have to scratch my head. I really do. I mean, you have opinion makers with huge audiences who are largely unread or illiterate about these things. They're shocked when they figure out, what? Wait a minute, who gets to make these decisions? Well, at Hillsdale College, they understand. Not many colleges can claim that they're 100% financially independent from both federal and state governments. In fact, I can think of only one college in the entire country that refuses government funding of every kind. Not one penny. Hillsdale College. Now, why? Why do they make that decision? Because government money comes with strings, and Hillsdale refuses to have government bureaucrats dictate what and how they are to teach students and how they're to run their campus. From the beginning, in 1844, Hillsdale has provided a world-class education that upholds America's founding principles and preserves the blessings of civil and religious liberty. Everything Hillsdale does, from the financial aid that 97% of its students receive to the completely free online courses it offers you, depends on generous donors who recognize the worth of independence. Financial freedom preserves the integrity and excellence of a Hillsdale liberal arts education, attracting the nation's brightest students in scores of fields of study, from music to biology to business. Hillsdale College teaches their students to pursue truth and defend liberty. Learn more about how Hillsdale College helps all of us become better, more independent citizens, and how you can help Hillsdale further freedom at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. And Dr. Larry Arnn, the great president of Hillsdale College, also is a close personal friend of mine for decades. And my wife and I had dinner with he and his wonderful wife, Penny, over the weekend, and we had a hell of a lot of fun. A hell of a lot of fun. Let's see. This one disagrees. That one disagrees, and we love it. Joe, Los Angeles, California, the Mark Levin app. Go.
Hi, Mr. Levin. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Yes.
I just have a question for you. How does one weigh, I really just wanted to get your take on this. How does one weigh the promises and the importance of Native American burial land versus industrial development? And I guess I can take your answer off of
No, don't take it off the phone, because the vast majority of this has nothing to do with Native American burial lands.
I mean, you have your... I just want to get your take.
Tell me, the Native American burial lands, is that 25% of the United States? Is it?
I don't know the answer to the broader question that you're asking.
No, you're asking me, and I'm trying to get the facts, because obviously you have a point you want to make. Almost 30% of the land mass of the United States is controlled by the federal government. So my question to you is, how much of that has anything to do with Native American tribal lands, burial lands, you said? And moreover, what's the difference? Because in many of these areas, the states keep these areas pristine. They're not just turned over to industries, necessarily. Some of this land is stolen from homeowners and ranchers and farmers and industries, but the vast majority of it isn't.
Right, and so that's another issue, right, where what is...
No, I'm trying to figure out your point. So whether the state controls it or the federal government controls it, you're talking about burial grounds. I'm not understanding your point. Is somebody building an industrial complex on an Indian burial ground somewhere?
No, but the fear is that if it's open and there are these irreplaceable, I want to call them irreplaceable items within the land that represent...
Well, sir, if you can identify them or somebody can identify them, they can actually make the case. But really, this is a non-issue, because we're talking about hundreds of millions of acres, most of which have nothing to do with Indian burial lands.
But there are Native American groups...
Well, tell me, sir, let me ask you something. Do you drive a car?
Do I? Yes.
Do you have a home?
Unfortunately, no.
Do you live in an apartment? What, do you live under
Correct.
a tree? Where do you live? You live in an apartment?
Correct.
Tell me, where do you think all this stuff comes from?
Well, I'm not sure if I don't understand your point. I get the point.
Well, everyone listening understands my point. How much of the United States, the land mass, should we take out of production? What would satisfy you?
It's not out of sense.
Wherever a Native American was buried 150 years ago?
Well, we made promises that we have failed to keep.
I'm not saying we should violate our promises. I'm asking you a question.
That is, I guess that's kind of deviating from my main...
Not deviating at all. We're dealing with the real world here.
We are, and that is a reality. But
For up to me, there'd be no Indian reservations. The word reservation to me is repugnant. Reservations were created to push Indians into these areas, so I think Indians and everybody else should be assimilating one with the other and should exercise their free will. That's what I think. What do you think of that?
I agree with you regarding that, but then what about places where...
I don't think Jewish cemeteries, Catholic cemeteries, Native American cemeteries... I would prefer not to see production lines on those properties, and I suspect on the vast majority of them there aren't. So why are you raising a red herring? You call here and you don't even know to the extent to which this happens.
The extent is...
Thanks for your call. Ladies and gentlemen, when a guy doesn't take a breath to reply to anything that I'm saying, but what about this and what about this? I can't take it. Some of you can. I just can't. I don't have patience for it. Lauren, Davenport, Iowa, Sirius Satellite. How may I help you?
Hi, Mr. Levin. Thank you so much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I'm a huge fan and taking some courses at Hillsdale because of you, so thank you very much for that.
You got it.
And thank you for shining some light on details that just seem to be very murky. My comment goes back to the beginning of the show when you were talking and we talked about Flynn, and I'm following the logic. I follow the logic that it was part of the transition team that Flynn made contact. What I don't understand is why he would lie about it when asked by the FBI.
Well, if he did lie about it, he shouldn't have, because it's
Right.
silly. Now, what I also said is the guy fought it for months, and then he ran out of money, and he was emotionally broken, and he gave up. So even though he's pled guilty to lying, I suspect when this is all said and done, he will also explain more about what he did. But look, he pled. That's the way it is.
It would have been so easy if you just said this was part of the transition team and just, you know.
Well, but James, I don't know the guy. James Comey, according to Brett Baer, who told Catherine Heritage over at the Fox News Channel, she reported that Comey looked at the same exact set of facts, and he concluded that Flynn did not intentionally lie, that he couldn't remember, that he didn't remember properly. So that's a possibility too, isn't it? I didn't report that. They reported that.
Yeah.
And after all, they're not, Brian Ross, so they do have some level of credibility.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with credibility. I just, at the time, have you had conversations and they ask so many times.
I know, but sometimes it's a little murkier than that, isn't it? If somebody is really out to ruin you, I want you to think about your own life. I'm not asking you to tell me anything. If somebody were to go through all your financial records and they would find that you took a tax deduction you shouldn't have taken. Well, my accountant told me, no, but you signed under penalty of perjury. Or they ask you what you said and you spoke to 50 different people and maybe you forgot, or maybe you did mislead. I don't know. It's just not sometimes so clear. Now, look, I don't know all the underlying facts here. I'm just trying to deal with your general point, which is, well, you ought to tell the truth to the FBI. Yes, I would tell the truth to the FBI and so forth. But that said, I'm saying he fought the contention, apparently, that he made a false statement for months. It wasn't until the 24 hours before they were going to drag him in front of a grand jury that he finally gave up. And he's selling his home. He doesn't have any more money to defend himself.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that they're just getting caught in the web, in the spider web at this point.
But I have a question for you. This prosecutor, why is he investigating post-election events that have nothing to do with collusion with Russia in the election?
They should not have this process going on at all right now. It is a waste of money. A waste of money and a waste of people's time, and
He's the special impeachment prosecutor. That's what he is. All right, Lauren, great call. I appreciate it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Tell me, are members of Congress free to fire staff members? Just curious. Are they free to fire staff members? Tell me, when members of Congress call for an FBI director to resign or condemn an FBI director, as they did Comey before Trump fired him, are they obstructing justice? Life is stressful. Even worse when the IRS is after you for back taxes. You may not think you owe them, but they don't care. You agonize when they'll show up, seize your bank account, put a lien on your home, or garnish your wages. It was even worse for Lori. Lori was engaged, but knew bringing $25,000 of IRS debt into the marriage was no way to start her new life. Lori did something really smart. She called the pros at Optimal Tax Relief. Optima stepped between Lori and the IRS, analyzed her case, and uncovered some game-changing facts that allowed them to settle her case in her favor. When Optima told Lori that her IRS problems were over, she called it the happiest call of her life, and her wedding was back on. You know, folks, I've been talking about Optima for many, many years now, and they've resolved over $500 million in tax debt for their clients, and they're rated A+, A+ with a Better Business Bureau. Getting your life back starts the moment you call Optima for your free consultation. Don't wait any longer. Get some help. Call 800-499-6300, 800-499-6300. That's 800-499-6300. We have a blockbuster at Levin TV tonight, and every now and then I am permitted to put a show in front of the paywall. Tonight's show will be in front of the paywall. It deals with Mueller, it deals with Comey, it deals with obstruction, it deals with it in ways that are different than on radio, as radio is different than TV. And I hope you'll take a good look at it. And we will put that, as I say, up on Levin TV Facebook, and we will link to it on Mark Levin Show Facebook and Mark Levin Show Twitter, approximately at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. In other words, in about 10 minutes. Assuming we don't shut the system down, and I don't think we will. All righty. Any other disagreeers out there? Stan, Bend, Oregon, the great KBND. How are you, sir?
Hey, Mark, nice to talk to you.
You too.
I just wanted to call in because I live in an area that's surrounded by the federal government, and we choked on smoke for about 6 weeks this summer because of the forest fires. Oregon burned about 500,000 acres of forest. Over $25 billion worth of board feet of timber went up in smoke. And that's how the Forest Service manages our forests. And I think something needs to change. In the old days, the loggers were out there with their water trucks and their chainsaws, and if there was a lightning strike, they would go put the fire out. And now nobody's out there doing that, and then we have all the wilderness and whatnot. And I know the Forest Service is hamstrung by a lot of environmentalists, but I can't believe the smoke that we choked in the whole month of August. I mean, it literally was like a fog out here. Mm-hmm. I've never seen anything like it, and I've lived here 40 years.
Mm-hmm. And the vast majority of the people never see it and don't live anywhere near it. And so, we can make laws in Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway, in a metropolitan area, that affects everybody who doesn't necessarily live in a metropolitan area. And that's part of the problem. All right, Stan, I appreciate your call. Quickly, Carl, Goldsboro, North Carolina, Sirius Satellite, go.
Hello, Mark.
Quickly, go.
Oh, goodness, can you hear me?
All right, Carl, you blew it. All right, thanks for your call, Carl. When I say quickly go, that means we have like 30 seconds for you to speak. That's it. But not tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. Call tomorrow, Carl, when I'll give you a little more time. I'm sorry. And, folks, we're going to post Levin TV. I really want you to watch it. It won't cost you a penny. It goes on for about 55 minutes. I spent a lot of time on this because I was thinking of you out there. And I'll see you tomorrow on the radio.